Ask what led you to say that. Some comments seem harsh, but it's not clear where they come from until asked. At the end of the day, in a small office, two coworkers finish a conversation that has taken a strange turn. One of them suddenly says, "I think leadership is somewhat outdated lately." The phrase sounds awkward, vague, and perhaps loaded. The other stops, but instead of refuting or changing the subject, he asks in a low voice, "What made you say that?" Without judging, without sarcasm, only with curiosity. A brief silence follows. Then, slowly, the first person leans in and says, "It's just that I sent that proposal last week, and no one responded. It seemed to me that it didn't matter." Now, the conversation shifts. The tension fades. What seemed like criticism was actually disappointment. And now there is room to discuss it without getting defensive. Asking what led you to say that works because it redirects energy. Instead of reacting to the comment, you lean toward its origin. It invites explanations without confrontation. In therapy, it's a way to open up deeper feelings. In parenting, it helps decipher what a child is trying to express. In sales or negotiations, it reveals underlying objections without aggravating the situation. It does not accuse nor correct. Listen without reacting. You're not asking them to justify it. You're asking them where their words originate. And when people feel heard at that level, they often clarify things. Some comments are not meant to hurt. They just come out clumsily. And a simple question asked gently can stop them before they cause real damage. Reflect its energy, then direct it. Pacing a conversation isn't about control. It's about cadence. Yours and theirs. In the back corner of a small bookstore's cafeteria, a manager and team member sit after shift. The younger employee is visibly frustrated. Tense shoulders, sharp tone, quick words. It's that nobody listens. I speak, and it's like I'm not there. The manager does not interrupt or try to fix the situation. Instead, he leans in slightly and adapts his pace. "That sounds exhausting," he says in the same direct voice. The employee nods, still tense, but softens slightly. A few more exchanges follow, and the energy gradually changes until the manager, now calmer, lowers his voice and says, "Can we look at a part of that together?" The employee's breathing stabilizes. He nods again, this time more easily. Finding someone who adapts to their energy, whether anxiety, frustration, or enthusiasm, helps them feel understood. When people are upset, calm advice seems distant. But if you reflect their pace and tone, even briefly, you send a clear signal. "I'm with you on this." And once that's felt, you can start to slow things down together. Therapists rely on this rhythm to build trust before moving forward. In parenting, it helps calm children in crisis without using force. In negotiation, it helps anxious clients clarify their ideas. In leadership, stress blurs less when recognized first. You don't have to stay in their energy. You just have to visit long enough to help them out. Sometimes the fastest way to move forward in a moment is to stop pulling and to start walking alongside it. Then, when the timing feels right, take the initiative. Use it even to face doubts. Doubts don't always have to vanish. Sometimes you just have to get over them. In the quiet hallway outside a conference room, two colleagues speak softly. One of them hesitates near the door, with his arms crossed and his voice tense. "I'm not ready to present this," she says. "What if they tear it apart?" The other nods, without pressing, and then says softly, "Even if they do, you will still have something stronger than what you had at the beginning." That pause eases the tension. She exhales, then nods. It is not that the fear has disappeared, but that it has lost its control. Doubt works like a trap. Once we imagine something is going to go wrong, we fall into the trap of trying to completely avoid it. But when you add the phrase, "even if," you change the focus and you are not pretending that failure is not possible. You are reducing its power. It tells the mind, "Yes, that could happen, but we will move on." In therapy, this helps reframe fear without denial. In sales, it can silence objections. Even if you use it only once a week, it saves time. In raising children, it reassures them without invalidating concerns. And in leadership, it creates calm under pressure. Even if implementation falters, we have support. Skepticism fades when it feels safe to exist without commanding. Although it doesn't discuss the doubt, it calmly gives it space and then overcomes it. Sometimes, tranquility isn't from denying what could go wrong. It comes from remembering that you're still okay. If so, use their words in response. Understanding usually begins by showing that you have not just listened, but heard. In a shared workspace, two colleagues pause by the window. One, frustrated, says, "I feel like no one supports the idea. It's like I'm presenting in a vacuum." The other nods and replies, "So, it's the vacuum that affects you most. It's not just disagreement, but the silence." The first one looks up, slightly surprised. Yes, exactly. The tone shifts. They are no longer just venting. They are unraveling something together. Repeating someone's words in your response, even if just a few words, has a stabilizing effect. It assures the other person that you are not waiting to speak for your turn. You are following their speech step by step. A small emotional mirror is created. In therapy, this builds trust quickly. In raising children, repeating phrases calms tension and helps them feel seen. In sales, reflecting the client's language confirms that he is understood. In negotiations, it slows things and softens resistance. It is not about flattery or imitation. It is about recognition. We all speak at our own pace. And when someone repeats part of a rhythm, the conversation becomes easier to trust. It doesn't take much, just a carefully formulated phrase that returns as words. Often, that is enough for someone to feel the conversation as theirs too. And feeling that way, they reveal what matters. The power of the pause. In a hallway, after the community meeting, someone asks a direct question. Everyone expects an answer, but the person stays silent. He looks up, thinks, then says slowly, "Good question. Let me think aloud for a second." The room changes. People lean forward, not because of what has been said, but because of what has not been said. The silence has made space for something real. The pause isn't hesitation. It is composure. That extra beat, a little longer than expected, can carry more weight than any words. A well-placed pause cuts through noise. It softens urgency. In intimate talks, it adds weight. In tense moments, it conveys calm. Even in everyday conversations, that little silence can make an answer seem more thoughtful than automatic. You will see it between two people who are repairing a tense friendship, where silence is not rushed to fill the discomfort, or when someone asks about a memory that they have not shared in a long time and stops. Not because they are unsure, but because they want to say it right. It works because silence is never a void. We fill it with expectations, worry, hope, meaning. A pause, used carefully, maintains that space long enough for it to be felt. The pause is not just an absence of words. It is the presence of thought. And when you let it rest completely, people not only hear what comes next, but also are prepared for it. Use the future rhythm. Imagine that a man and his teenage son are sitting on the edge of a park bench, with takeaway coffees in their hands. Hesitant, the boy looks at the ground, turning over the issue of whether he should apply for an internship. "I'll probably screw up the interview," he says. His father listens to him, then leans back slightly and asks him, "Imagine you get the job. What would your first day be like?" There's a pause. The boy does not respond immediately, but something changes in his posture. He raises his eyes slightly. "I guess I would be nervous," he says, "but I think I'd feel a little proud." The conversation progresses, scene after imaginary scene. Asking someone to imagine the future, especially with the words "imagine that," bypasses their defenses. It opens the door without demanding entry. It is not an order. It is not a sales pitch. It's a silent invite to see a better self. The moment they do, even briefly, the choice becomes not yours, but theirs. Therapists use it to help clients visualize life beyond their problems. Sellers use it to make the benefits seem personal. Parents use it to help their children imagine the rewards or consequences. Even in negotiation, it makes minds orient toward possibilities, not pressure. It is not about creating certainty. It is about creating a moment in which change feels less strange and real enough to consider. Sometimes, the most persuasive thing you can do is not prove that you are right. It is to let someone try it themselves in silence. Let them finish the sentence. There is a type of interruption that is not strident. It happens when someone thinks they know where you're going and comes forward to finish your thought. They may be right. They may be trying to help, but still take something from you. It is not the words, it is the space. The small space you needed to arrive at the idea yourself. Letting someone finish their sentence is not about education. It is about giving them space so they can land completely. There is confidence in pause. It shows that you're not in a hurry to respond or prove that you understand. You let them shape the moment before adding anything else. You will notice it especially in slow conversations, in which someone is trying to explain something they have not said aloud. Perhaps they're turning over a feeling or trying to clarify the story in their head. And when they are interrupted, even with good intention, it shows. A small hesitation, a sentence that never finishes. Letting them finish not only makes them feel heard, but helps them listen. Because often we do not know what we really think until we have said it. And that we are allowed to do so without being directed or completed is a silent gift. So, the next time you are in a conversation and think you know what someone is about to say, do not say it. Let the silence linger if necessary. Give them the floor until they decide to leave. You will be surprised at how much more sincere things sound when they are allowed to express themselves freely. The yes ladder. Agreement does not always begin with a big question. It often starts with something smaller. A quiet yes each time. In the kitchen of a shared office, the team leader approaches a new employee. It is their first week, and they have been quiet during meetings. Instead of launching into giving feedback, the boss starts with something simple. Hello. Did you find the printer okay yesterday? They nod their head. Yes. A smile. And the onboarding videos, did they freeze on you? Another nod. No. All good. One more question. Do you mind if we talk for 5 minutes this afternoon? Another soft yes. This time it is easier. And when they sit down later to talk about workflow and expectations, there is no defensiveness, just shared rhythm. The ladder of yes works by creating impulse through agreement. First, small questions are asked that do not pose a threat, things that the other person can answer yes to without effort or hesitation. Each yes relaxes the body just a little more. A pattern is then established. When something more important is asked, it is not perceived as a demand. It is perceived as the next step forward. It is something seen in old friendships when they meet again after a long time, or in community organization, where trust is built not with speeches, but with a simple mutual understanding. Even in casual relationships, agreement generates comfort before influence. You're not pressuring them. You are aligning them. You are facilitating the other person's experience with their momentum. Because the hardest thing about saying yes is not just the word. It is the fear of being pushed too quickly. But when you're already halfway there, taking one more step feels quite natural. Not because someone has convinced you, but because you have gotten there by giving one yes after another. Use humor first, then logic. It is not always necessary to resolve all tension. Often you just have to soften things. A man and his teenage daughter are sitting in the car in front of the grocery store. The engine is off now. The bags are ready, but neither moves. The atmosphere feels tense. They have been arguing all day long. The grades, the time to get home, their tone of voice. Now there is silence, but not real peace. The father looks ahead and says, "You know, when I was your age, I was punished so often that my parents made me a punishment calendar with colors." She smiles and tries to hide it. He leans in closer to her. "Seriously, I had weekends booked for bad attitude until mid-April." She laughs just a little. "That is enough." He waits and then calmly adds, "I understand that you think I'm always on top of you, but I need you to listen to me when I tell you that I care too much to remain silent." Humor lowers their defenses. It breaks down barriers faster than mere facts. When someone is upset, stressed, or defensive, logic can seem like pressure. But a well-placed joke, a little self-criticism, a surprising phrase creates some space. Space for the real conversation to truly land. In therapy, humor disarms any shame. In sales, it turns tension into real trust. In parenting, it brings children out of their shells. In conflicts, it restores the rhythm before a real point is even reached. You are not using humor to avoid the serious part. You're using it to earn the right to say just that. Sometimes, The best way to be heard is not by pushing harder, is to make someone laugh enough to stop being so defensive. And then, when he is ready, you take him to the heart of what matters. Gently and with full awareness. Pretend that you are the host. There are times when you walk into a room and feel like you are invading other people's space. The conversations are already underway now. The groups have already formed, and it is easy to stay in the background, waiting for someone to invite you to participate. You are at a birthday party where you know nobody. You've been invited by a common friend who is now on the other side of the room, in the middle of a story. You stay near the kitchen, pretending to check your cell phone. Then, without thinking much, you refill the bowl of potato chips and arrange a stack of napkins. You ask the guy next to you, "Hey, have you tried that weird green sauce yet?" He smiles. "What's in it?" "No idea, but I'm already committed." "Want some?" It's small, but at that moment, you stop being a guest. You acted like a host. When you act as if the space is partly yours, when you assume a small responsibility for how others feel, you automatically gain a silent authority. People notice it, even if they don't know why. The human mind associates confidence with care, not with volume or calling attention, but with the tranquility of feeling in control of the environment. It is a trick that great teachers, skilled negotiators, and good managers often use, not because they need control, but because people respond better when someone subtly directs the room. It makes others feel comfortable. It is not necessary to wait to be given permission to feel you belong in a place. You don't need a title or position. Just start acting as if the place could be better thanks to your presence. And take a small step in that direction. Normally, that is all it takes for the rest of the room to unconsciously agree. You are not only there, you are part of it. Sit diagonally, not head-on. In any conversation, there is a subtle change in energy when two people feel they are in tune. It's not about the words, but the space between them. You are sitting in a cafeteria with a coworker you don't know well, and you have just started chatting about a project. At first, the conversation feels a bit awkward. You're sitting facing each other, looking directly into each other's eyes, which is fine, but something does not quite fit. Without thinking too much, you change your posture, slightly turning your body to one side, so that you're more diagonal than head-on. The difference is immediate. They also move without realizing it, imitating your angle. Suddenly, the conversation flows more naturally. You're no longer adversaries sitting on both sides of the table, but two people comfortable in the same space, sharing ideas without the pressure of being face-to-face. That is the beauty of sitting diagonally. The mind perceives direct confrontation as more intense. Even if the conversation isn't tense, it is a subconscious barrier. But by placing yourself at a slight angle, you reduce that sensation, and the conversation becomes more relaxed. It tells the brain that there's no threat. It is not a confrontation, but collaboration. You will notice it in interviews, therapy sessions, and even informal meetings. When someone sits in front of you, but at an angle, it is less intimidating, more open, and as a result, the other person usually feels more comfortable. It is a small change, but it makes a big difference in how people connect. It is not necessary to force comfort. Just adjust the angle and let the conversation flow with a more natural rhythm. Ask, how did that make you feel? Understanding does not always have to do with what happened, but with what it made someone feel. At a quiet table in a cafe, two friends sit facing each other. One tells a story, something about a job interview that went wrong. He speaks fast, trying to downplay it. So I finish answering the question, and the boy keeps looking at me as if I had spoken to him in another language. The other friend nods, a second passes, and then asks delicately, "How did you feel?" There's a pause. The person blinks, then exhales. "Embarrassed, I suppose. I thought I had it, but at that moment I felt completely out of place." The tone changes, the rhythm slows. Now they're not only counting, but reflecting. The conversation goes from being superficial to something more substantial. How did that make you feel? It is one of the simplest questions to ask, but also one of the most disarming. It shifts the focus from events to emotions, from the external to the internal. Therapists do it not to inquire, but to allow someone to stop and connect with their own experience. In raising children, it opens a space for the child's emotional vocabulary to grow. In conflicts, it reduces tension by showing interest instead of correcting. In leadership or sales, it tells the other person that they are being treated as a human being, not as a problem to solve. You're not pushing to deepen. You are inviting them. You're letting the other person take a step forward if they wish. And when you ask with real interest, without obligation, the answer that follows often becomes the part of the conversation that they really needed most. Nodding while asking is equivalent to a bias toward yes. Two friends are in front of a food truck, both indecisive. One turns to the other and says, "Do you want to share the sweet potato fries?" Nodding while asking. Without even thinking, the other also nods. Yes, of course. It is not pressure, it is rhythm. When you nod while asking a question, a subtle bias toward agreement is created. The body says yes, and the brain usually follows. It is called bias toward yes, and it manifests in the most insignificant details. When someone makes a gesture of agreement, we imitate it unconsciously. When someone tilts their head forward with curiosity, we do it too. The body speaks first, and the answer comes after. You will notice it in casual decisions, such as choosing a movie, a route, or planning an outing. One person suggests something, nods slightly, and the other finds himself saying, "Okay," before weighing the alternatives. It is not mind control. It is alignment. A small sign that says it is probably safe, probably reasonable, probably okay. And most of the time it is. The effect works best when the question already leans toward yes. You are not convincing. You are eliminating friction. It also works when helping someone overcome their doubts, such as offering encouragement gently. "Do you want to try it?" Nod, and suddenly the answer will seem less risky. So the next time you ask something simple, let your body say it first. A gentle nod, a calm presence, just enough to tilt the answer toward yes without forcing it. Ask, "What are you thinking about right now?" Sometimes moments of silence occur for reasons that are not obvious, and the only way to overcome them is by asking delicately. Two people are sitting next to each other in the corner of a small meeting room, with some paper spread between them. The conversation was animated, ideas flowed, until it was suddenly interrupted. One of them is silent, hitting the table with a pen and looking lost. The other waits a few seconds, then says in a low voice, "What are you thinking about right now?" Without urgency or pressure, only frankness. The pause is broken. The one who is silent exhales and then says, "Honestly, I don't think this proposal is going to work as we had planned. I just didn't know when to say it." And so, without more, the wall rises. What could have stayed repressed now has an outlet and path. That question, "What are you thinking about right now?" works because it takes nothing for granted. It doesn't direct, guess, or try managing the silence. It simply opens a door. It is useful in therapy when someone shuts down, in raising children when a child is silent but not angry, in a relationship when energy changes and nobody knows why, in negotiation when the room stagnates and tension increases. It is not about resolving the moment. It is about reconnecting to it. Asking what someone thinks lets them take control. It shows that you're not there to talk to them, but to talk with them, even when it is uncomfortable. The best conversations aren't always fluid. They are those in which someone cares enough to notice silence and is kind enough to break it without forcing anything. Break tension with a whisper. It isn't always necessary to match the tension. Sometimes you just have to reduce it subtly. Two coworkers are sitting in a small meeting room. The atmosphere is tense after a disagreement. One of them leans forward and lists missed deadlines in a high-pitched voice. The other remains motionless, listening with a calm, impenetrable face. The frustration increases until the silence begins breaking. Then the listener leans slightly forward and says, in an almost inaudible whisper, "I think we are both too tired to win this fight right now. The change is immediate." The volume of the room not only lowers, but disappears. The heat cools. The person on the other side of the table exhales, rubbing their eyes. "Yes," he murmurs, now quieter. "You're probably right." A whisper in a tense moment restores the room. When someone expects resistance and hears kindness, The pattern is disrupted. It tells the nervous system there is no danger here, that it's okay to lower your shoulders and breathe slowly. In therapy, whispers are used to get people out of overload. In raising children, they help calm instead of intensify. In leadership, they change team dynamics without the need for authority. In close relationships, they say, "I'm still with you," without explanations. You aren't giving up power. You are choosing a different influence. Raising your voice often raises barriers. Lowering it invites the other person to meet you in a safer place. In intense moments, the quieter voice usually conveys the clearest message. We don't need to push. We can pause even now. Feign a deadline to get faster results. You're sitting at your desk with your coworker in front of you, checking their emails. You have been working on the same project for a while, but progress has stalled. There is no immediate pressure, but the task feels endless. You say casually, "Hey, I have to finish this by 3 p.m. Can you gather that data by then?" Your partner nods and suddenly accelerates the rhythm. He dives into his files and gathers everything with determination. Before you realize it, the task is finished, and you realize that the deadline you gave him was not real. It was just an incentive to make him work faster. When we feel the weight of a deadline, real or not, the brain starts at full speed. The feeling of urgency reduces distractions and improves focus. That surge of energy does not always need a deadline. But when we believe we have one, we are more likely to act decisively. This works in sales when a seller creates a sense of scarcity. And it works in your daily work life. Even in relationships, a sense of time pressure can help make decisions. The trick is not to deceive anyone. It is about creating a mental environment that makes them act more decisively. It is not necessary to pressure anyone. Sometimes, creating a sense of time is enough to encourage action. Raise your eyebrows. When you see someone, you are walking down the hallway of your office toward the break room. As you pass a coworker, you make brief eye contact. For a split second, raise your eyebrows enough to greet and keep walking. They do the same, smiling slightly. A slight change in posture when returning the gesture. It's small, but something happens. Without a word, you both have just shared a moment. That small and subtle raising of the eyebrows indicates recognition, a tacit acknowledgement that you see them. And, in return, they are likely to feel more connected to you. When we raise our eyebrows to greet, we are showing openness. It is not just a facial expression. It is a sign that we are available, that we are interacting with the person in front of us. The brain captures these signals immediately and creates a small link. It is the same reason why a smile can make someone feel welcome. But raising your eyebrows goes one step further. It is not just warmth, it is recognition. This works in all kinds of social environments. In sales, raising your eyebrows at the right time can make a customer feel cared for and valued, even without words. In therapy, a therapist can use this gesture to show they are actively listening. Even in personal relationships, it helps people feel seen in a meaningful way. It is not necessary to say anything for someone to feel recognized. Sometimes, a simple eyebrow raise can create an instant connection, conveying to the other person the tacit message, "I see you, and I am here." Let them correct you. That way they will gain confidence in you. You're sitting in front of a coworker at a casual meal, talking about an idea for an upcoming project. You mention a detail about logistics, but they interrupt you in the middle of the sentence. Actually, that is not quite correct. The moment feels a bit different. Instead of downplaying it, you pause, smile slightly, and say, "Good point. Thank you for pointing it out." You let them take the initiative to correct you, and after a few more minutes of discussion, they begin to contribute more freely, offering suggestions and improving the project with you. By allowing them to correct you, you have created a space where they feel informed and respected. People are programmed to trust those who allow them to contribute meaningfully, even if it's something small like a correction. When you open the door for them to enter, you are subtly telling them that their opinion matters. This works because, psychologically, when someone corrects you, they feel more involved in the outcome. It's not just about them giving the right answer. It's about them taking responsibility for the process, which creates a sense of collaboration. The brain naturally generates trust when someone feels recognized for their experience or knowledge. This is seen in sales, when a salesperson allows a customer to correct details about their needs. In therapy, when a therapist lets the client lead the conversation. And in leadership, when a leader invites team members to contribute their ideas, even if it means correcting them. Allowing someone to correct you demonstrates confidence, not weakness. It is an invitation to collaborate, and that is when trust truly grows. People don't just listen to you. They feel like they are part of the journey. Say, because to get immediate obedience, not because the explanation is always good, but because there is one. We are programmed to relate requests to reasons. Without a because, a question seems like a demand. Add it, and it becomes a conversation. Even if the reason is barely more than air, you'll see it in everyday moments. Can I sit here because my foot hurts? Do you mind if I go ahead because I've already paid for the coffee? Will you lend me the charger because mine is in the other room? The actual logic does not have to be irrefutable. The word itself acts as a key. It indicates structure, intention, a path. And people follow paths more easily than voids. This is also observed in smaller social dynamics. It's not about manipulation, just about reducing friction because it gives the other person a reason to say yes without thinking too much about it. So the next time you ask for something, even if it's something small, don't just ask for it. Anchor it, because once you give a mind a reason, it stops holding back. Ask for opinions, not answers. Advice can feel heavy, but asking for someone's opinion opens a different door. Late in the morning, in the shared kitchen of an office, two coworkers are by the sink, waiting for the coffee to finish brewing. One of them turns, with a printed draft of a proposal in his hand. "I'm not sure what to do with the structure," he says, turning to the second page. "What do you think of this design?" The other one reviews it, relaxes a little, and starts talking. Not cautiously, nor as if he were solving a puzzle, but colloquially. They exchange ideas for a few minutes. No pressure, no pretensions, just a fluid conversation that somehow outlines the idea without either of them forcing it. Asking for an opinion instead of a direct answer gives the other person space to think without feeling cornered. It shows that you value their perspective, not just that they are right. That change of tone makes it easier for people to open up and share without filters. Therapists often ask for opinions to help their clients reflect safely. In raising children, asking children what they think makes them feel heard, not evaluated. In negotiation, turn tension into dialogue. In sales, keep human conversations instead of transactional ones. When you ask for an answer, someone must be right. When you ask for an opinion, they need only be sincere. The best conversations often start when certainty is set aside. Invite sharing perspectives, not only solutions. And you will discover that people are more willing to meet you where you are now. And from there, better thinking occurs on both sides now. Show a little vulnerability than your strength. In the quiet break room of an office, two coworkers sit at the ends of a long table. One, newer to the team, glances sideways between sips of coffee. "I think I totally screwed up the call with the client this morning," he says with a shrug in a calm, sincere tone. The other looks up, surprised by the frankness, but before he can respond, she adds, "I reviewed notes during lunch and made a revised presentation plan. I think it's solid." His words have a different impact than if he had only shared the solution. By naming a doubt first, even briefly, his confidence seems earned, not just rehearsed. That small act of micro-vulnerability, naming a moment of doubt, frustration, or uncertainty, creates a space in which others feel invited, not excluded. It lowers defenses, opens ears, and makes what you say more believable. When followed by a calm statement of direction or strength, it draws others in, rather than pushing them away. Therapists use it in sessions to help clients open up. Parents use it to teach resilience without seeming superior. In leadership, it creates true authority. In sales, it can soften skepticism without losing any credibility. Revealing a flash of something real, not as a drama, but as a fact, makes the strength that follows feel stable and human. People respond better to confidence that has roots now. letting others see both your balance and the moments when you almost slip does not weaken your message. It makes it more credible because what is calm and real tends to go further than what's polished and perfect. Repeat their words to gain their trust. In a crowded outdoor market, someone explains where they bought the handmade scarf they're wearing. The other person, who at first is only half listening, suddenly pays attention when they hear, "I guess I'm drawn to things that seem to have gone through something." The listener repeats it without dramatizing, only things that seem to have gone through something. The speaker pauses, nods, and continues, now more open. It doesn't take great insight for someone to feel understood. Sometimes it's enough to gently repeat their own words. This is the power of discreet reflection, not imitation nor interruption, just repeating a key phrase from someone's sentence. A subtle sign that you've captured the most important thing. You'll notice it during long walks in which someone is gradually opening up and you simply follow their language, or during informal chats in which someone says, "It has been a weird month," and you respond, "Weird how?" You repeat their word instead of replacing that. It is disarming because it's easy. No corrections, no redirections, just space for expansion. And it works even when things get tense. If someone says, "I have felt rejected," and you respond with "rejected," without skepticism, only with sincerity, they're more likely to give you an explanation rather than become defensive. The brain relaxes when it hears its own words reflected back. It feels less alone now. So the next time someone shares something real, let your response arise from what they've already given you. A word, a phrase repeated carefully now. This is what trust often sounds like now. Familiar, but coming from someone else now. Ask for help like a teammate would. Asking for help is not always easy. It entails uncertainty, vulnerability, even hesitation. But the way we ask can influence answers more than the request itself. You are in a small cafeteria, sitting at a corner table with your laptop open and the screen softly shining. In front of you sits a coworker with some papers between you both. She stops, hesitant, then leans gently forward. "Hey, I'm stuck with these numbers," she murmurs calmly, pointing to the page. "Can we take a look together?" Her tone is calm, warm. More than a request, it is an invitation to collaborate. Without hesitation, you approach and examine the sheets together. Almost instinctively, you feel you get involved, you commit, you not only help but participate. Moments later, solutions begin to take shape, forged silently by a subtle change in approach. The subtle effectiveness comes from how our minds perceive teamwork. When we are asked as teammates instead of simple helpers, people instinctively respond with openness and cooperation. The request becomes inclusive, dissolving resistance and activating shared responsibility. Therapists often encourage collaboration instead of giving direct advice. Expert salespeople frame conversations as mutual explorations. Parents suggest teamwork to motivate children, and negotiators use inclusive language to foster collaboration rather than opposition. Approaching others as teammates eliminates pressure and creates quiet confidence. It turns a request into a common goal, replacing reluctance with genuine commitment. In daily interactions, framing your need as a common goal gently changes the dynamic. It's not about persuasion or manipulation. It's simply about opening the door to genuine collaboration. Sitting on the edge of the seat is a sign of commitment. The afternoon sunlight fills the small waiting area at the neighborhood bus stop. Nearby, two friends are sitting talking quietly, and their conversation blends smoothly with traffic sounds. At first, both are reclining casually, with voices low and relaxed. Then, one of them leans subtly forward, gently resting her elbows on her knees and leaning slightly. Almost immediately, the other friend responds instinctively, mimicking her posture and tone. Their voices lower, the conversation becomes energized. Each word is listened to with greater attention. Each thought is absorbed a little more deeply. Without saying a word about it, her subtle movement has silently conveyed genuine interest and concern, drawing her companion into a deeper commitment. This silent shift to the edge of the seat works naturally because our minds instinctively interpret subtle posture changes as signs of genuine interest. Leaning slightly forward indicates openness and active participation. We intuit when someone cares enough to get physically closer. That is why therapists often lean slightly forward during sessions, silently encouraging openness. Salespeople subtly lean toward customers, showing genuine interest. Parents intuitively lean towards their children to comfort and connect with them. And negotiators use this posture to silently communicate sincere attention and respect. Sitting closer to the edge is not just a physical movement. It is a silent sign that you are fully present and genuinely committed. It subtly transforms interactions, fostering tacit trust, connection, and mutual attention. Body language can gently reshape a moment without words, delicately creating an environment of true presence and deeper human connection. Keep your hands visible at all times. Trust often begins before a word is said, sometimes with something as simple as the position of hands. You are sitting across from someone at a small table in a shared workspace. It is the first time you have collaborated with that person, and the conversation has not yet found its rhythm. As you speak, you keep your hands lightly resting on the table, moving them gently as you explain an idea. When the other person speaks, you listen attentively with your hands open and visible without hiding them under the table or in your lap. Little by little, the other person relaxes. She begins to mimic your calm. The pauses between you start to feel more comfortable. The atmosphere shifts from formal to familiar. Nothing important changed, but something settled. We are programmed to seek safety signals, especially in early interactions. Visible hands indicate openness, honesty, and a lack of threat. They keep the conversation anchored in something nonverbal, yet deeply human. Therapists consciously keep their hands visible to clients. Sales professionals avoid crossing their arms or putting hands in pockets during presentations. When raising children, open gestures help them stay calm and attentive. Even in high-stakes negotiations, hands on the table outweigh a well-crafted argument. It's not about exaggerated movements or forcing gestures. Just let your presence feel fully available. When your hands are visible, your intentions are perceived more easily. And when people can read you, they trust you more readily. Sometimes, smallest signals are the ones that weigh the most. Keeping your hands visible influences not only how others see you. It influences how safe they feel to be seen too. Say nothing, just nod. Sometimes the most useful thing is to say nothing. In a dark corner of a supermarket cafeteria, two friends sit with half-drunk cups of coffee. One speaks slowly, hesitantly, insecurely about something that happened in his family. It's nothing dramatic, but it's something weighty. The other just listens quietly. No advice, no reactions, just a fixed gaze and simple nod. The one who speaks exhales and continues a little faster, more freely. Not because they're guiding him, but because he feels safe enough to continue. Saying nothing and simply nodding is one of the most powerful but underutilized social tools. It says to the other person, "I'm here. Continue." It doesn't interrupt. It doesn't rush. It doesn't divert attention away. It simply remains present with them. In therapy, this is how the deepest parts of a story tend to emerge. In raising children, it helps children speak without fear of being corrected in the middle of the sentence. In a negotiation, it shows you are listening without dominating the conversation. In a conflict, it prevents the situation from escalating by giving the other person space to vent first. You aren't guiding. You are holding the line. When people talk, especially about something vulnerable, they constantly look for signals. Is it safe enough to continue? Are they judging me now? Is this too much information? A simple nod at the right moment silences all of that. Because sometimes the best support isn't saying the right thing. It is saying nothing and showing you are still with them always. Let them speak first, then you'll win. There is right there, the real beginning of any conversation. When you let someone speak first, it shows where they're at. What it says gives you the map. And once you have a map, it is easier to meet them without guessing. Most people rush to speak first, thinking it gives control. But often the opposite happens. When you speak second, you shape your response with precision, not projections. You will notice it in slow conversations with new people or in small meetings where someone needs a minute before opening up, even in informal decision-making, such as choosing where to eat. Whoever speaks second usually sets the course because they respond instead of reaching for something. It works because people reveal more than they realize when speaking first. Capture their tone, their rhythm, and what matters to them. And when your response is based on what they have said and not on what you have assumed, it is smoother and lasts longer. Letting them speak first isn't passive. It is a strategic stillness, a way of learning before speaking. And the silence before speaking is where true power lies. Say, "Tell me more," instead of arguing. Contradicting people often makes them raise voices. Curiosity makes them clearer. At a quiet dinner after a long day, a couple sits face to face. The conversation has become tense. Small things have been accumulating. One says, "It's just that lately I don't feel like you're present." The other begins to speak, ready to defend himself, ready to explain that this is not true, but stops, exhales, and instead asks, "Can you tell me more about how you have been feeling?" The change is immediate. The first person leans forward, not out of anger, but relief. It's like I was talking and you were somewhere else. Even when you are at home, your mind is still at work. Now it is no longer a fight. It is something softer, something that can be fixed. "Tell me more" is an invitation, not concession. It indicates that you are listening to understand, not just waiting for your turn to speak. It cools tempers and leads the moment toward meaning. In therapy, this is how layers are revealed. In raising children, it helps them process frustration without shutting down. In sales, it discovers what really matters to the client. In conflicts, it breaks down walls without needing to prove anything. You are not giving the reason, you are asking. You are demonstrating that the person in front of you is more important than your need to be right at that moment. Arguments often arise from the feeling of not being heard. But when you stop trying to win and simply ask for more, you often get what they didn't say the first time. And that is where resolution usually begins. In silence, with 3 words that allow the other person to continue speaking until there is nothing left to discuss. Use "we" instead of "you." "You forgot to close the door" versus "it seems we forgot to close the door." The facts are the same, but the feeling is different. One points and the other joins. When you say "we" instead of "you," you are not changing what happened, but how it's perceived. The change is subtle, but the emotional impact is immediate. Suddenly, you are no longer blaming. You are collaborating. It is not about evading responsibility, but preserving connection. Because even the smallest phrases can make someone feel isolated or included. And "we" is one of the fastest ways to inclusion. You will hear it among friends trying to resolve a misunderstanding. "We must have crossed wires" sounds lighter than "you did not say that." Or when decisions are made in a group. "Are we leaving?" transmits more warmth than "are you ready to leave?" It also appears in apologies. "We have not handled it well." It softens the ground. Even if a person has a larger role, the shared framework generates trust. The "we" language transmits unity, especially in moments that may become tense. And when people feel you are on their side, they stop defending and start listening. So the next time something goes wrong, do not give it prominence. Share it. Use "we" not to blur the truth, but to maintain it delicately. Because the objective is not to be right, but to remain united. Act as if you're already part of the group. Comfort and the sense of belonging are not achieved by waiting to be welcomed. They often begin silently within you. The sunlight enters warmly through the bookstore cafeteria window, brushing the polished tables and neatly stacked novels. At a corner table, a woman settles into her seat and calmly puts her bag down. Nearby, an informal book club gathers, its members conversing comfortably. Without hesitation, she gently leans into the conversation and naturally adds her opinions on the novel they are reading. There are no presentations or nervous apologies, just the natural cadence of someone who already fits in. After a brief pause, the circle widens subtly, the chairs shift slightly, and the words become warm and inclusive. In a matter of minutes, she is indistinguishable from the rest, part of the soft murmur of shared connection. This subtle naturalness works because belonging is not always taken for granted. It is often recognized when you behave as if you already belong there. You transmit confidence and security silently. People respond instinctively to this calm, welcoming presence, perceiving the absence of hesitation or uncertainty. That is why expert negotiators speak with calm authority. Therapists foster connections through genuine comfort. And that is why the best salespeople integrate into conversations naturally. Even parents, when they join their children in play, instead of interrupting it, find more fluid ways to deeper relationships by acting silently as if you already belong to the place. You dissolve invisible barriers. People respond to your comfort as permission, inviting you to enter spaces effortlessly, almost unconsciously. Belonging is not something noisy or forced. It is the soft and intuitive choice to gently enter new moments. Understand that acceptance does not always need formal invitations. Simply follow the tranquility and silent confidence. Thank them for the detail, not the action. Gratitude is deeper when directed at the intention, not only the result. A man and his colleague are sitting opposite each other in the quiet office room. He has just finished a presentation that did not go entirely well. The atmosphere was courteous, but flat. As he closes his laptop, she says to him, "I know it did not go as you expected, but I have seen how much you worked on it, especially in the introduction. You have really tried to connect with the public." He looks at her and nods more slowly now. "Thank you," he says, not because she fixed anything, but because she saw something important, the effort. Most people are used to being thanked for what they do, for staying late, for bringing something, for fulfilling their work. But that they are thanked for what they mean, the consideration, the care, the attempt, that has a different impact. It feels more real. In raising children, this gratitude builds confidence in children who try, even when failing. In therapy, it softens shame for unfinished progress. In leadership, it builds loyalty by showing attention to what is often unseen. In sales or services, it transforms transactions into relationships. You are not rewarding results. You are honoring the origin of action. Because the truth is that actions do not always go well. The food burns. The plan falls apart. The moment is not right. But when someone says, "I thank you for thinking about doing it," it validates something more subtle and lasting. The intention. And in the end, what matters most is not only what people do for us. It is what they intended. That is what we remember. That is what remains. Touch the table to ground yourself. Attention. In conversations that deviate, attention rarely returns on its own. But sometimes only a small, constant gesture is needed to recover it. Late in the afternoon, in a downtown cafeteria, two friends sit at a corner table. One of them is explaining something important about work or perhaps something deeper. The other listens, but also looks at the barista, the street, the cup in front of him. The first, in the middle of the sentence, gently places a hand upon the table. It is not dramatic, just flat, firm, and calm. The movement is almost imperceptible, but it takes effect. The other's gaze refocuses. The conversation intensifies. What follows is understood more clearly. Now both are fully focused. Touching the table acts as a subtle signal, not only for others, but also for oneself. It indicates presence. The rhythm of conversation can be fragile, especially in meetings, interviews, and even family dinners. A firm hand gives the words a place to live. Therapists sometimes use it in tense moments to refocus the space. Salesmen fix attention with a light gesture at the right moment. In raising children, it helps them feel safe during conversations that might otherwise deviate or intensify. And in difficult discussions, it adds silent weight to what is said. You are not hitting the table. You are anchoring it. Your body says this is important without interrupting. Words are heard more clearly when the body remains still with purpose. And a calm hand resting on the surface between, you can silently say to the room, "Come back to this." Pausing before responding is synonymous with authority. Confidence is not always about speaking first or louder. Often, moments of silence say much more. You're sitting near the window of a cafe. The sunlight softens through clouds. Nearby, two colleagues discuss a delicate topic. One asks the other a difficult question, expecting immediate clarification. Instead, the woman takes a slow sip of her coffee and calmly places the cup on the table. A brief, pleasant silence occurs, enough to change the rhythm. Next, she responds clearly and deliberately, with careful, thoughtful, and confident words. Without raising her voice, she has quietly taken control of the conversation. The atmosphere around the table subtly changes. Now her opinion carries more weight and her perspective is considered more thoughtful. That small pause before responding conveys a calm, silent authority. It indicates that you value thoughtful reflection over hasty reactions, demonstrating confidence and composure. When you pause to think, listeners intuitively perceive that response as more deliberate, measured, and credible. Therapists often use silent pauses to give clients space to think more deeply. Negotiators rely on silence to underscore their sincerity. Parents pause to reinforce their authority without confrontations. And expert salespeople take a breather after questions, allowing trust and respect to form. This brief silence helps frame your thoughts, amplifying the value of what follows. It shows that you feel comfortable enough to endure a moment of uncertainty, letting your authority be imposed silently through firm composure instead of hasty words. In everyday interactions, silence is not empty. It is a soft, carefully created space that silently reinforces your presence and credibility without needing to raise your voice. Have you ever noticed that when people feel in tune, without being studied, they open up? This is what the mirroring technique takes advantage of. It starts with small details, such as sharing the rhythm, adopting a similar posture, or capturing the rhythm of speaking. When someone leans toward you, you follow slightly. When they pause, you don't rush. You let the silence breathe. When you respond, you reflect their words. It's not about imitating, but about resonating. And at that moment, the conversation stops seeming like negotiation and starts seeming like a connection. Imagine a conversation in a hallway. A team member is clearly reserved. Instead of interrogating him, you simply match his calm tone, reflect his posture, and give space. He speaks more. You stay with him. And little by little, what was reserved becomes open. Mirroring works because it avoids resistance. It indicates, I'm not here to fix or judge you. I'm just here with you. You will see it in therapy sessions, in important sales calls, in difficult moments of raising children, when logic fails but empathy prevails. People soften when they feel you are on the same wavelength, even if the topic is difficult. When you match someone's emotional rhythm, they don't feel cornered. He feels safe. And safety leads to honesty. The mirror technique does not require intelligence, only attention. It is one of the quietest and fastest ways to build trust. Smile first, feel later. While walking through a familiar park, someone runs into a neighbor they hadn't seen in a long time. Without thinking, he smiles at him. A quick movement of the face, almost automatic. The neighbor returns the smile in an equally reflective way. A few steps further on, the person realizes that they really feel lighter, happier, as if something had changed. He didn't smile because he felt good. It felt good because he smiled then. The body can shape one's mind. It is subtle, yet powerful. When you smile, especially in tense or uncertain moments, you not only express emotions, but also create them. The muscle sends signals upward. The brain adapts without thinking much. You will notice it in fortuitous reunions in which someone's smile begins awkwardly and ends up sincere. Or in crossings, when two strangers look each other in the eyes for a second and exchange that small gesture of human recognition. Or even when you see your own reflection and return a half smile, just to see what will happen. It works because the brain listens to the body, changes the pattern, and the emotion follows. Not always, not completely, but enough to tilt the moment forward. It does not mean faking feelings. It means gently inviting them, guiding with the body, and letting the heart follow if it wants to. So, the next time things feel flat or disconnected, start with the smallest change, a soft smile, even if it's just for yourself. You don't have to feel it yet, but sometimes the meaning comes later. Question: can you help me understand it? In a small office, just after closing time, a manager and an employee are sitting across from each other. The employee is frustrated, speaks fast, gestures, and lists the reasons why a new policy is not going to work. The manager listens without interruption. Then, instead of arguing, he leans slightly forward and says, "Can you help me understand what part seemed wrong to you?" The tone changes immediately. The employee calms down. It is the decisive moment. He says that it seemed to him that it came out of nowhere. Without context, it reached the team simply in the middle of week. The manager nods, not because she agrees with everything, but because she finally understands where it comes from. From there, the conversation becomes a collaboration instead of rejection. Asking, "Can you help me understand it?" does not mean giving up your point of view. It is about changing the ground under which tension is generated. It invites the other person to explain themselves without needing to defend themselves. It places you on the same side of the table, even if your opinions differ. In therapy, this is how decisive moments begin. In raising children, it helps them feel respected. In sales or negotiations, it keeps the conversation open without losing track. In relationships, it turns conflict into conversation. You're not giving up control. You are creating a connection. You are saying, "It matters more to me to understand you than to prove that I am right." When people feel misunderstood, they shut down. But when they're invited to explain, they often soften. That question, when asked with true intention, can turn resistance into clarity. And clarity makes everything easier to handle. Question: what would you do? You're in a meeting discussing a new project proposal with a colleague. There's tension in the atmosphere. Some details do not add up, and the conversation begins to stagnate. Instead of launching yourself to give a solution or try to impose your point of view, you pause and ask, "What would you do in my place?" Your colleague blinks, clearly surprised by the question. They shift in their seat, process it a moment, and then begin to outline their thoughts. The tension eases. Suddenly, they're thinking along with you from your position. The conversation feels more collaborative, as if you're solving the problem together. Asking, "What would you do?" works because it inverts the usual dynamic. Instead of positioning yourself as the person who needs help, you put the other person in a position of responsibility without them feeling pressured. It is subtle, but it invites them to offer something more thoughtful, more empathetic, because now they're not only offering advice. They're reflecting on what they would do in your place. This approach creates a deeper connection and helps people feel more involved with the solution. They begin to think from a more personal place, and their answers tend to be more authentic. That is why it is so effective in negotiations, in customer service, and even leadership. When you ask this question, you show respect for the other person's perspective and invite them into the solution. It is not about getting the correct answer. It is about involving them in a way that opens real collaboration. Look at their shoes. Read their personality. You do not have to judge, just observe. Worn tips, laces double knot, clean but very used, striking colors, silent soles. People do not always choose their shoes carefully, but they live in them. And over time, the way someone treats their shoes says more than they realize. It is not about fashion, but about rhythm, about how they move through the world. Some pairs are impeccable, clean, protected, and carefully placed next to the door. Others are practical, worn out by the errands and early mornings. Some do not match the rest of the outfit, but it is clear they are the most comfortable option. They all offer information, even if they do not reveal it. It is not necessary to draw conclusions, just follow the patterns. You will notice when someone wears rain boots on a dry day, not because they have forgotten, but because they planned it in advance. Or when someone wears brightly colored sneakers, but their posture is calm. There is a contrast worth understanding. Even the worn soles of expensive shoes tell you something. How they spend may not reflect how they care for themselves. And when someone shows up with shoes that clearly have not been chosen for the occasion, a wedding, a hike, a night out, it is rarely casual. Either it is a message or a comfort barrier that prevails over the message. Feet do not lie, and the shoes they wear hide silent stories. Therefore, if you want to read someone, do not just listen to what they say. Look down briefly, not to judge, but to understand the ground they have traveled. Turn the chair slightly toward them. The connection usually begins where your body is pointing, even before you utter one word. It is early afternoon in a hotel lounge. Dim light, soft music. Two coworkers are sitting nearby after a long day of meetings. One of them leans back in their chair, slightly tilted, with their legs crossed and their phone still in hand. The other, without saying anything, turns their chair a few degrees. Not aggressively or dramatically, just enough to look toward the conversation. They rest an arm lightly on the side, with their body open and all their attention focused on the conversation. Little by little, the first one puts down their phone. Their posture changes. The words flow more easily. The tension begins to dissipate, replaced by mutual tranquility. That small movement, like the angle of a chair, says more than it seems. It communicates interest, respect, and presence without needing explanation. Our mind constantly seeks signals that indicate to us if we are welcome or if we are kept at a distance. When your body leans towards someone, even slightly, it creates a tacit invitation. Therapists arrange the chairs this way to create a feeling of warmth and security. Negotiators use this position to reduce friction without a word. Parents often notice that turning to a child, not just looking, invites more cooperation. In leadership or sales, it's the difference between talking to and being with someone. Perfect posture or polished words are not needed here. Just a silent physical signal that says, "You have my full attention." And sometimes that is all that's needed for the rest of the conversation to flow. It is not about making a moment feel bigger. It is about allowing it to flow without any resistance. A simple change of position can build more trust than anything you say. Following the 5-to-1 ratio rule, two friends are cleaning after a trip. One is folding clothes, and the other cleans the countertops. The atmosphere is relaxed, but there was a small discussion earlier. Forgotten plans, voices raised. Now, one of them playfully throws a water bottle and says, "You're actually the best at organizing chaos." No apologies, just an honest and intentional moment of goodwill. This is the 5:1 rule now in action. For every difficult moment, several small positive gestures are needed to re-stabilize the ground. It is not about grand gestures, but about silent reinforcements. Appreciation, respect, warmth, affection, humor. Solid relationships, whatever their type, aren't built by avoiding conflicts. They are built by having enough good to stand firm when tension arises now. Think of it as a simple balance. If someone interrupts you once, but makes you laugh, you don't call them rude, you call them funny. If someone forgets your birthday, but has worried about you every time you've been sick, the balance tips towards trust. This manifests itself naturally in long friendships, in which jokes, memories, and small details cushion occasional friction, or in nightly conversations, in which a compliment can silently undo something that has not been said before. It is not about keeping account. It is about remembering that the emotional tone of any relationship is cumulative. The hardest moments don't weigh so much when surrounded by affection. So when things aren't going well, don't always rush to fix them. Simply start adding small truths that make someone feel seen again now. Use open gestures to invite more frankness. Conversations start more easily when nothing in your body says you're closed. It is late afternoon in the quiet common area of a library now. Two students are sitting opposite each other at a shared table, with papers scattered between. One of them leans back slightly, his arms relaxed at his sides, and the palms of his hands occasionally gesture outwards as he speaks. His voice is calm, but it is his relaxed way of behaving, without defenses, that makes the space between them feel light. The other student, initially a little reserved, begins to lean in. Her voice becomes warmer, questions flow more freely, and something shifts. The dialogue feels easier now, less like effort, more like exchange. Open gestures, Those small, visible movements that avoid crossing your arms or turning inward silently invite trust now. When we physically signal we are not on the defensive, others feel safer to take a step forward. In therapy, therapists use a soft, open posture to create a climate in which clients feel safe speaking. In negotiations, a calm and open gesture at the right time can dissipate tension without words. Teachers guide the energy of the classroom with a simple movement of the hand. Parents soften resistance simply by adjusting how they sit or approach. The mind observes the body and also observes other bodies too. We take subtle signals from posture, from the placement of hands, and from the direction of a look. When those signals say, "I am open," they allow the other person to stop being defensive and start participating. Large movements or rehearsed body language are not needed. It is enough to show sufficient openness to demonstrate you aren't protecting yourself from the conversation. That is what opens the door for another person to enter. Let's assume that most people don't know this. You're sitting in an informal dinner with colleagues, and the conversation flows. Someone mentions a topic about which you know a lot, but instead of immediately intervening with your experience, you lean slightly forward and say, "Most people don't know this," and everyone present at the table immediately changes their attention. It's not just about what you're about to say. It's the way that you framed it. They feel like they're about to hear something exclusive, something others might not know. The room goes silent as you share your idea, and you can feel their genuine interest. The phrase, "most people don't know this," works because it sparks curiosity. It prepares the brain to expect something valuable or surprising. People are programmed to pay attention when they believe they are about to learn something exclusive. The brain reacts by focusing on the speaker, creating a sense of importance around the information shared. This tactic is effective in many situations. In sales, for example, using the phrase can subtly elevate a product, making it seem special. In presentations, it can capture attention and make the audience eager to hear what's next. Even in everyday conversations, it sparks interest and encourages participation. By just adding that phrase, you have increased the conversation's interest without exaggerating. You have made the moment seem more meaningful, and people are naturally drawn to it. It's not about deceiving anyone. It's about harnessing the natural desire to discover something new and meaningful. The next time you want to grab someone's attention, or to make your words stand out, try adding that simple phrase. It can make even the smallest detail worthwhile. Show the palm of your hand. Gain confidence. Intermediate conversation. Someone makes a gesture with an open hand. It is not dramatic or theatrical, just a casual movement with the palm up while speaking. The other person does not flinch or back away. In fact, they lean slightly forward. Open palms indicate something we rarely name aloud: security. Long before words evolved, the human body learned to detect threat or openness in posture. Hidden palms meant concealment. Visible palms, absence of weapons, absence of tension, only presence. Even today, that instinct remains. You will notice it when someone tries to calm the tension, not by speaking softer, but by keeping their hands visible and relaxed. Or when a friend shrugs with both hands outstretched, saying, "I didn't mean it that way." The message arrives because the body conveys it first. It is also why certain conversations are easier when you're sitting next to someone, with your hands resting on the table, without crossing or hiding them. The body makes the promise before the words do. It's not about acting. It's about aligning. When what you say and how you physically show yourself match, people believe you without needing convincing. So, if you want to build trust quickly, don't just say the right thing. Keep your hands where they can be seen, not as a sign of surrender, but of sincerity, because when the body tells the truth first, the mind tends to follow. Question about the immediate connection in childhood. You are on the balcony at a friend's house. Someone you barely know joins you. It is a quiet and polite person. After a few minutes of chatting, you ask them, "What were you like as a child?" He stops, not cautiously, but as if reviewing old photos in his head. Then he smiles, sincerely, a little obsessed with trains. Suddenly, it is no longer trivial chat. You're not only learning things about them, you are meeting a version of them that shaped the rest. and the tone of the night changes completely. There's a reason why questions about childhood work like that. Memories are not only old, but formative. They are often unfiltered, full of joy, frustration, and nostalgia. When someone talks about their childhood, they're not only giving you information, they're giving you a blueprint of how they became who they are. And since it is personal without being conflicting, defenses are not raised. It is a soft entry. Therapists use it. Coaches use it. Good dates, good interviews, close friends, all end up finding their way to it. You can shorten that time by asking early, gently, without forcing. You're not looking for traumas or snooping for secrets. You're opening a door to where people feel most themselves, even if they have not visited that place in a long time. The person in front of you has lived a life. If you want to understand it faster, start where the story began. Most people will not resist. They will feel relieved that someone finally asked them. Say their name when you say goodbye. The end of an interaction is usually more important than the beginning. People remember the last thing you say, and how you make them feel right before they leave can leave a lasting impression. It is a quiet afternoon, and you are finishing an informal dinner with a coworker. You have been talking about everything and nothing for a couple of hours. The evening is coming to an end, and you get up to leave. As you head towards the door, you say, "All right, thank you for dinner, Emily. I love seeing you." As soon as you say her name, the moment changes. She looks up, smiles a little more, and says goodbye to you with more warmth. It is as if you had closed the circle, strengthening the connection with something personal. Saying someone's name, especially at the end of an interaction, creates a subtle but powerful bond. It is a reminder that they have been heard, that they have been seen. And when you say their name, when you say goodbye, it remains in their mind as a signal. That conversation has been important. The brain responds naturally to its own name. It captures attention and makes the interaction feel personal and genuine. That is why good leaders, friends, and salespeople use names naturally in conversations. It indicates that the relationship is real and not just transactional. This trick works because it is simple and human. In therapy, when a therapist uses a client's name before ending a session, the sense of connection deepens. In negotiations, saying the other person's name can soften an agreement. Even when raising children, using a child's name when saying goodbye can comfort them and build confidence. The next time you say goodbye, don't just say, "See you later." Add their name to the farewell and watch how it reinforces the moment. Be the first to apologize during a conflict. The tension does not always break on its own. Sometimes, someone must take the first step. In the back room of a small bookstore, two coworkers are storing inventory. The conversation feels tense. Short answers, little eye contact. The day before, they had an argument about something unimportant that got out of hand. As the silence lengthens, one of them puts a box on the floor and says in a low voice, "I know I was defensive yesterday. I was nervous, but that's no excuse. I am sorry." The other stops, surprised. Then, in the same low voice, he nods. "Yes, I didn't handle it well either." The tone softens. They continue working, but the atmosphere is different now, lighter, calmer. Apologizing first doesn't mean assuming all the blame. It's about showing that you're willing to leave the battlefield. When conflict hardens both sides, the first apology is a sign of safety. It gets things out of emotional deadlock. Even a small gesture, such as "I shouldn't have raised my voice," or "I could have handled it better," is often enough for the other person to lower their guard. In raising children, it is a model of responsibility and restores connection. In negotiation, it blurs the confrontations. In leadership, it builds trust. And in close relationships, it lessens the unnecessary distance. The strength of an early apology lies in the fact that it does not depend on being right. It depends on being prepared. It doesn't always matter who started it. Often, what matters most is who ends the situation. And the first to apologize is usually the first to tear down the wall that separates you. Break the script. Control the moment. "Hello, how are you?" "Good." "You good?" That's the usual. A loop. Nobody thinks. Everyone just responds until someone breaks the ice. "Hello, how are you?" I once saw someone rescue a duck from a fountain using a traffic cone. Now the moment feels real. Breaking the script means getting out of the expected rhythm, not to confuse, but to awaken things. Most conversations take place on autopilot. They are safe, familiar, forgettable. But when you interrupt that rhythm in a gentle and fun way, you take control of attention, not by force, but by contrast. It could be a surprising compliment instead of a hello, a story instead of a status update, even a silent pause where people expected quick words. You will see it when someone responds to, "How are you?" with "better now that you're here," and somehow it works. Or when a guest at a meeting offers to help with the dishes instead of waiting to be entertained. People notice because the rhythm has changed. It works because the brain is programmed to notice novelty. Patterns make us disconnect. Surprises make us present. This does not mean being random. It means being awake, choosing to play instead of acting, redirecting the moment, not with volume, but with novelty. So the next time you feel a moment that deviates from the usual, change a line. Change the rhythm. Be unexpected enough for someone to remember it, because whoever breaks the script writes the next line. Ask them to teach you something. Everyone wants to feel valued, but the easiest way to convey that feeling is often overlooked. In a quiet photocopy room at the end of the hall, two coworkers wait by the printer. One looks at the machine and murmurs about it always getting stuck in the third tray. The other looks with curiosity. "It seems that you really know how this works." He says, "Can you show me what to do if it gets stuck?" There is no sarcasm, no flattery, just a sincere question. The first coworker perks up a bit, not visibly, but enough to change his tone. He approaches with quiet confidence and explains the process. What began as a boring task becomes a moment of casual connection. Not because they have had a deep conversation, but because one asked the other to share what he knows. Asking someone to teach you something, even if it is something small, gives them a sense of importance. It tells them that you are listening, that their knowledge matters. And that kind of invitation, small and sincere, is powerful. In therapy, trust can build when a client is asked to explain what has helped them cope with a situation. In parenting, it gives children a moment to feel capable. Sellers use this to transfer authority to the customer. In leadership, it creates space for others to step up without being asked directly. Letting someone teach you does not diminish your status, it elevates theirs. And that small change alters the way they see you and how they behave. Sometimes, the easiest way to earn respect is to offer it first, not through praise, but curiosity. Letting someone explain something they know is often the quietest way to say, "I see you." Ask questions that make them reflect. Most conversations drift into easy topics, shared opinions, casual complaints, and everyday news. They keep the conversation going, but nothing really registers. And then, from time to time, someone asks a question that makes you stop and think. You are at the back table of an almost empty cafeteria. It is late. You're talking to someone you have known for a long time, but not well. Suddenly, he asks you, "What do you think your younger self would be proud of if he saw you today?" At first you laugh, because it catches you off guard. Then you become thoughtful. Something in the question makes you reflect. You keep thinking about it, and when you answer, it is not automatic. It is something you have never said aloud. That is the change from routine to reflection. And when a question achieves that, the dynamic between two people completely changes. The brain is programmed to follow patterns. But when a question interrupts that, not to challenge, but to invite, the mind turns inward. It stops looking for prepared answers and begins to form a new one. That is where connection resides. This is seen in coaching, in mentoring, in lasting moments of parenting. A question like, "What have you unlearned this year?" Or, "What are you afraid to wish for?" opens much more than a simple chat. It shows interest without pressure. The goal is not to be witty. It is about asking in a way that makes the other person feel it's worth answering. Most people want to reflect, but they are rarely asked something that gives permission to do so. You don't need perfect words, just a sincere question that makes someone quiet for a second. Not because he's gotten stuck, but because he is finally thinking about something important. That pause is the sound of trust being built. "Tell me," that reminds me of a story. The information stays, but stories last. In the quiet kitchen of an office, two coworkers sit facing each other during lunch. One of them vents, frustrated because their ideas are always overlooked in meetings. There is tension in his voice and something more subtle underneath. Doubt. The other listens, nods, and says, "That reminds me of a story." They lean slightly back, maintaining informality. In my last job, there was a guy who barely spoke at meetings, but the few times he did, people really listened to him. In the end, I asked him how he got people to take him seriously. He replied, "I stopped trying to look smart and waited until I really believed in something." It took him a while, but everyone started turning to him. The atmosphere changes, not drastically, but enough. The first coworker sits up straighter. The moment seems less like advice and more like recognition. Saying that reminds him of a story is more than transition. It is an invitation. It softens the advice and turns it into something shared. It gives space to the emotion without seeming clinical. In therapy, it creates empathy. In parenting, it teaches without lecturing. In negotiation, it creates common ground. In sales, it makes ideas easier to assimilate. And in everyday life, it changes the dynamic from, "Let me fix this," to "You are not alone." People don't always want answers. They often just want a thread to hold on to, something familiar, something human. A story does that without pressure. You are not changing the subject. You are expanding the space. And sometimes that small space is exactly what the moment needs. Use scarcity. Only a few people know it. You're sitting in a coffee shop chatting with a friend about the latest technology trends. He is intrigued by a new application that you have been using, something that is causing a sensation, but that still goes a bit unnoticed. When he asks how it works, you lean slightly towards him and lower your voice just enough to seem like you're telling him a secret. Well, only a few people know this application for now. It is still a kind of exclusivity, but it is going to be a success. Her eyes open slightly. Suddenly, they seem more interested. It is as if you had given them access to something special and their interest shot up without them realizing it. You have activated a feeling of scarcity, and that makes them more interested in what you're saying. Scarcity works because the brain is programmed to respond to what is rare or limited. When something is presented as exclusive, the mind feels a subtle pressure to act quickly or risk losing it. It is not about being manipulative, but about taking advantage of a natural instinct that we all share, the desire for what seems rare or highly demanded. This trick is seen everywhere. In sales, marketing professionals know that saying that only a few are left increases the urgency. In negotiations, when you insinuate that something is limited, the other party feels a greater need to close the deal. Even in a casual conversation, mentioning that something is known only by a select group adds value to it in the listener's mind. When information is presented as something rare or exclusive, people naturally want to be part of that group. They are more likely to lean in, listen more attentively, and value what is offered to them. A little scarcity can turn a simple conversation into something far more attractive. Ask for advice, gain influence. Two classmates are chatting after a group project. One turns to the other and says, "Hey, a quick thing. How would you have handled the part where the plan almost fell apart?" Without ego, without traps, just a sincere question. And so, without further ado, the dynamic changes. Asking for advice does not make you seem insecure. It makes people feel valued. It invites trust. And, surprisingly, it often leads to greater influence, not less. This is because, when someone gives advice, they unconsciously commit to your success. He begins to desire the result that he has helped to shape. It is no longer just your effort. It is partly his. This is seen between neighbors who are trying to fix something simple, such as a dripping faucet, or in new friendships when one person asks the other, "How do you usually handle things like that?" The act of asking says, "I trust your judgment," and that is rarely ignored. It is not flattery, it is connection, and it turns the script around, because most people expect influence to come from confidence. But influence often arises from humility. And the nice thing is that you don't even have to follow the advice. The simple act of asking invites someone into your thought process. And that is where the alignment begins. So if you want someone to open up, forget the talk. Ask him what he does. The answer may be useful, but the moment the question is asked is what really matters. Be interested, not interesting. Sometimes, the most magnetic person in the room is the one who is not trying to be. A man and a woman are sitting at opposite ends of a shared bench outside a small bookstore. It is one of those quiet afternoons when no one is in a hurry. The man starts a conversation. Nothing flashy, just a comment about the book she is holding. She smiles and says she is rereading it for the third time. Instead of offering his own opinion, he asks her what makes her return to it. Her answer gives rise to something more. The family, memories, the old routines. She keeps talking and he listens, not with courtesy gestures, but with true attention. 10 minutes pass before she says, "I don't usually talk like this with strangers." But she is not apologizing. She is surprised, even grateful. Showing interest in someone, instead of trying to be interesting, changes the energy. It eliminates the need to impress. And in that space, people relax. They become more open, more committed. In sales, this generates trust faster than any witty speech. In therapy, it brings out depth. In parenting, it tells a child that their thoughts matter. In dating, it creates space for something sincere. And in everyday life, in banks, waiting rooms, during shared meals. This is how meaningful connection quietly begins. It is not necessary to be memorable to have impact. You just have to make someone feel that way. In the end, people rarely remember your stories as much as what you made them feel while they told theirs. And whoever asks with curiosity, without ego, usually makes a better impression. Lower your voice. Increase their respect. At a local event, a disagreement arises over something unimportant. Who is supposed to bring what? Voices rise slightly. The energy changes. Then, a person speaks without raising their voice, without force, but lower, slower, calmly. Suddenly, the room recalibrates. Not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. Volume is not synonymous with authority. Presence is. And lowering your voice in moments of tension conveys something stronger than dominance. It conveys control. It's not about whispering. It's about resisting the temptation to match the noise around you. When you lower your tone, others lean in. When you slow down, others follow you. And in that change, attention becomes concentration. You will notice it in conversations in small groups when someone changes the energy, not monopolizing attention, but softening their way of expressing themselves. Or during emotionally charged conversations between close friends, when a person stops pressing and begins to anchor. It works because we are programmed to notice contrast. A quiet voice in a noisy space does not fade. It does not impose itself aggressively, but with seriousness. And it often surprises people because we're used to thinking that what is louder is more important. But in many moments, it is the voice that goes down and not the one that goes up that dominates the room. So the next time you feel the need to raise your voice, try lowering it. The difference will not be in the decibels, but in how others react when they realize that they don't have to make an effort to hear you. Do not interrupt. They will think you are brilliant. Silence can do much more than fill space. It can change the way they see you. In a quiet corner of a co-working space, two coworkers are sitting next to each other with their laptops closed. One of them, clearly frustrated, begins explaining a problem with a project. Something about deadlines, a lost email, and the feeling that no one is on the same page. The other one just listens. He does not nod his head, does not interrupt, does not offer well-intentioned solutions halfway through the sentence. Only a constant and thoughtful presence. After a while, the first one stops, exhales, and says with a small laugh, "I'm not even sure that all that makes sense." The listener finally speaks calmly and slowly. "Yes, it does." And then he adds a brief, concise idea, a sentence that ties everything together. It fits perfectly. The moment feels intense, deserved, and effortless. Being quiet when someone is speaking, especially when you think you already know what they will say, creates something unusual, a feeling of weight. When you let them finish, their words feel respected. And when you finally speak, your voice conveys more clarity, more calm, and more impact. In therapy, that type of listening creates security. In negotiation, it denotes patience and confidence. In raising children, it generates trust. And in sales or team leadership, it attracts people without pressuring them. Not interrupting doesn't mean being passive. It is about being deliberate. It presents you as a thoughtful person who thinks before speaking, who pays real attention. It is not necessary to say much to seem intelligent. Sometimes it is moderation, silent discipline that speaks for you. He is carrying something in his hands. First impressions form faster than we think, often even before a word is said. In a corner of a co-working space, a young man enters a small group that is conversing. He is new, unknown to most of them. As he approaches, he carries 2 cups, one for him and one for whoever is nearby. "I didn't know if anyone wanted tea," he says, offering them without ceremonies. One of the group members laughs, accepts it, and a circle subtly opens to make room for him. The man sits in silence at first, but feels welcome. It is not necessary to present credentials or names. He entered with something in his hands, something simple, something to share. Carrying something, whether it's coffee, a notepad, a printed document, or even a snack, does much more than occupy your hands. It gives you presence without pressure. It softens your entry into a space by showing intention and usefulness. You are not just arriving, you are arriving with something. In raising children, giving them something to carry can change their energy in new environments. In therapy, holding a tactile object can reassure anxious clients. In networking, offering gum or passing a pen is sometimes the most natural way to break the ice. In leadership, entering a meeting with materials in hand subtly indicates that you are prepared without a word. What you carry doesn't have to be important. It just has to say, "I am here for a reason." Even small objects can calm social tensions. They give your hand something to do and others something to interact with. And sometimes that is all it takes to turn an entrance into a welcome. Confess first, then ask. You're sitting in the living room at a friend's house, catching up. It is an informal evening, but there's something you need to ask him. A favor that you're ashamed to ask. Instead of going straight to the point, you look at him and say, "I'm a little ashamed to say this, but I have to be honest. Lately, I'm a little behind with things, and I really need your help." They look at you with an understanding expression, listening attentively, not out of obligation, but because you have been honest about your difficulty. Then you add, "So, I was hoping you would have time to give me a hand with this." What changes now is the frankness of conversation. You have acknowledged your challenge before making the request. It's not just about what you need. It's about how you present it. Vulnerability makes the request seem sincere, less transactional. This works because the brain responds to vulnerability with trust. When you confess first, you create a space in which the other person does not feel pressured or caught off guard. You can process your need with empathy. And that changes the dynamic from a simple favor to an opportunity to support someone you care for. In sales, this can be seen when someone acknowledges a product's shortcomings before highlighting its advantages. In therapy, when a therapist shares a story the client identifies with before asking about the client's experience. In relationships, when you open up before asking for something in return, when you confess first, the request makes more sense. It's not about just asking for help. It's about inviting someone to be part of something real. Always end on a compliment. The final moments usually carry more weight than we think. The last thing we say is what usually stays in memory. In the small break room of an office, a brief conversation between coworkers comes to an end. One of them had been letting off steam. A project had fallen apart. A client had not responded, and nothing seemed to go right. The other offered suggestions, asked thoughtful questions, and above all, just listened. When the first one gets up to leave, he stops at the door. The one who has listened kindly adds, "By the way, I wanted to tell you that your last presentation is still being talked about. You really set the standard for the quarter." The room relaxes. The atmosphere clears a bit. The rest of the day goes better, even if nothing changes. Ending with a compliment does not mean ignoring problems. It means choosing what is remembered. In any interaction, especially in difficult, uncomfortable, or emotionally charged ones, what remains is the final note. A single positive comment can act as buffer. It helps the person to leave the moment feeling seen, not just managed. Therapists often close sessions this way, reinforcing something the person has done well. In raising children, it encourages resilience after a correction. In sales, close a presentation with sincerity. In leadership, leave the door open to future trust, even after a disagreement. You don't have to flatter. You don't have to sweeten. Just find something real and say it. The last thing you offer someone, even in passing, is usually the first thing they take with them to what comes next. And when that is something kind and true, it stays longer than you think. Let the silence linger a second longer. The stillness can say more than any answer if you let it last longer than what is comfortable for you. In a small meeting room with a window ajar to the late morning traffic, two people sit facing each other. One has just explained an error, something small but avoidable. The other listens and says nothing. Not immediately. She just maintains eye contact for an instant longer than expected. The silence is prolonged. The person speaking moves slightly in her chair and, without anyone asking, adds more information. What has happened before, what she would have done differently, and how she's going to fix it. The conversation continues with clarity, not because of pressure, but because space has been left for the truth to arrive. Letting the silence linger a second longer does not create discomfort. It creates gravity. The mind fills the space. And when you give someone the floor without rushing to fill the silence, they often keep talking. Not because you ask them to, but because there is something in that pause that invites them to continue speaking. Therapists use this to help people go deeper. Expert negotiators let silence extract concessions. Parents maintain it to guide reflection. In interviews, silence encourages honesty. In conflicts, it often softens the tension. More than quick answers could. That pause tells the other person, I'm not in a hurry. I'm not going to overlook this. I'm here with you. Go ahead. We're often taught to respond quickly, to manage silence. But when you trust it just for a moment longer, you give the other person space to develop. And in that extra second, things you didn't expect are often revealed in silence. When you're nervous, help someone else. Anxiety narrows your focus inward. But sometimes the quickest way to stabilize yourself is to shift that focus outward. It's early in the morning outside a conference room. A woman is alone by the wall, nervous, looking at her phone, waiting for a round table to begin. Across the room, someone is struggling with a name tag. He manipulates the pin clumsily, clearly annoyed, but trying not to show it. She realizes. After a brief pause, she approaches. Do you need help? She asks him. He looks relieved. Thanks, sir. And they both share a brief laugh. It's nothing dramatic, just a small gesture. But when she returns to her place, something has changed. Her hands are firmer. She breathes more easily. The tension has not disappeared, but it no longer dominates her. Nervousness makes the world shrink around us. Our attention turns inward. Heart rate, thoughts, self-judgment. But the mind is designed to interact with others. And helping someone, even briefly, changes the focus of mental attention. It tells the body, I'm not in danger. I'm useful. That change does not eliminate the nerves, but it interrupts their control. In parenting, anxious children often calm down when asked to help with a task. In high-pressure sales, seasoned professionals reset by asking questions or offering help. Therapists teach reality connection techniques that involve focusing on the needs of others. The benefit is not just distraction, but purpose. Helping gives nervous energy a purpose. It keeps the body moving and the mind stable without forcing calmness. Confidence is not always innate. Sometimes it starts by taking a small step toward others and letting that moment bring you back to yourself. Use silence to take ownership of the space. Just finished a story. People expect a reaction. The speaker remains silent, without discomfort, just long enough for the room to calm around them. No apologies, no rush, just space. And in that space, something changes. People adapt. Silence is not tension. It is presence. Silence, when maintained with intention, is not emptiness, it is structure. And those who can endure it especially when everyone else is trying to fill it, often end up dominating the room without even raising their voice. This is seen in slow conversations in which someone responds after a pause instead of instantly, or in group moments where a pause before speaking makes the words feel more deliberate. It's not about power. It's about rhythm. You don't have to fight to speak if you show that you are in no hurry to fill the space. You'll notice it more in social situations where the pace is frantic, where the first person who doesn't rush is the one everyone starts looking at. Not because they demand it, but because silence draws more attention than noise. We take for granted that people who leave space are not buying time, but thinking. And when the words arrive, they have a different impact. So the next time you feel the temptation to fill the void, wait. Let the moment breathe. Let others come to you. Because silence is not the absence of speech. It is a sign that something real is about to be said. Count to 3 before responding to an emotion. Emotions flow quickly, often faster than our thoughts can comfortably follow. But sometimes clarity lies in the pause between feeling and speaking. You're standing in line at the checkout of your local grocery store. The soft hum of the scanners marks a calm rhythm. In front of you, a cashier mistakenly scans an item twice. The customer notices and responds sharply, with increasing irritation. Instead of reacting immediately, the cashier pauses and breathes slowly and calmly. 3 seconds pass, enough for the tension to relax. Then she apologizes softly, in a firm, serene voice, and effortlessly restores calm to the moment. The customer's shoulders relax slightly, and irritation gives way to calm. The entire exchange silently transforms into understanding. Giving yourself 3 seconds before responding to intense emotions gives the mind space to gently regain balance. This brief, intentional pause avoids hasty reactions and diffuses potential conflicts naturally. It is a simple and intuitive approach that therapists recommend in emotional discussions. Negotiators use it to maintain a productive dialogue. Parents instinctively employ it to manage children's outbursts calmly, and expert salespeople employ it to patiently handle difficult interactions. That small delay is not about suppressing feelings, but about gently creating space for reflective clarity. It silently transforms volatile moments into opportunities for genuine connection and mutual respect. Often, the smallest adjustments in timing silently change the nature of our interactions, shifting conversations from conflict to understanding, simply allowing emotions to soften naturally before speaking. When you are unsure, repeat the last thing they said. It is easy to think that you need the perfect answer, but often the best thing you can do is give the other person back their own words. At a secluded table in a quiet restaurant, 2 friends sit across from each other. One of them is in the middle of a diatribe. Nothing dramatic, just a slow release of frustration over a tense relationship. It's as if, whatever I said, they always heard something else. She murmurs, picking at her food. The other friend does not rush to give advice. Instead, she repeats it delicately. They always hear something else. He stops. Yes, he says, now more focused, as if you're going to ask a question, and they were acting as if you were accusing them. The conversation deepens, not because she has an answer, but because she has given him space to continue developing the topic. When you are not sure how to respond, especially in an emotional or uncertain moment, repeating the last sentence with curiosity keeps the connection alive. It's not robotic. It's not passive. It shows that you're interested, but without haste. Therapists use this to help clients keep talking without guiding them. In parenting, it slows tense moments without invalidating them. In negotiation, it reveals deeper concerns. In relationships, it creates security without pretending to have solutions. Repeating the last thing someone has said gives them permission to remain in the moment, to clarify, reflect, or delve deeper in their own terms. It is not necessary to be insightful immediately. You just have to show that you're listening enough to repeat something. Often, that is all that is needed for someone to move on and eventually find the clarity they didn't know they were looking for. Praise behind their backs. Mention in passing that someone handled an awkward situation with surprising calm, but not to that person, but to another. And don't do it ostentatiously. Just say it and move on. The next day, they will be more cordial with you, a little more open. Maybe they don't even know why. Because compliments, when given discreetly and indirectly, do not lose their power. They multiply it. When you say something kind behind someone's back, it often reaches their ears. Not always complete, not always immediately, but people talk. And when they discover that you have spoken well of them without the need for recognition, the impact is greater. That's because the absence of acting makes the compliment seem real. You'll see it in groups of friends where someone casually says they always stand firm in a crisis, and it comes back like a late note. Or between neighbors when one says to the other, "He is the kind of person who cares about you when no one else does." The impact is not only what is heard, but what is deduced. If you spoke kindly when they were not present, you probably see them generously when they are. This is not manipulation. It is a silent affirmation, a way to let someone know that they are important without the discomfort of saying it to their face. So, the next time you notice something good in someone, consider not telling them. Say it close. Say it sincerely. Say it when there is nothing to gain for you. And trust that it will resonate exactly where it should. Share a secret first. Trust does not begin with a question. It begins with what you're willing to reveal. In the back corner of a quiet train car, two coworkers sit across from each other, with laptops half open but untouched. One of them looks up and says, "I almost didn't take this job. I was convinced that I would be the least qualified person there." There is no punchline, no acting, just a quiet confession. The other is surprised, then curious. "Really?" The first one nods. "Yes, imposter syndrome really affected me. I didn't even tell anyone that I had applied for the job. I felt safer that way. Something changes." The other closes his laptop. "Okay, in that case, I guess I can admit that I'm terrified of next week's presentation. Just thinking about it, I'm already sweating." The train keeps moving forward, but now the conversation does too. When you're the first to open up, even in a controlled way, you transmit security. You're not looking for gossip. You're letting your guard down so that others don't have to keep it so high. It doesn't have to be something dramatic, just something real, something you wouldn't tell just anyone. In raising children, it helps children stop acting and start connecting. In therapy, it softens the silence. In leadership, loyalty is earned without demanding it. In conflicts, it replaces defense with common ground. You're not exposing your weakness. You are offering trust. And most people will reciprocate if you let them. The real power of sharing a secret first is not in what you say. It is in what it makes possible for the person that you have in front of you. And often that is the moment when everything else starts to seem a little more sincere. What is your story? Not what you do. Connections deepen when we invite the person, not just the label, to the conversation. You're sitting on a bench on a train platform. A man is sitting a few meters away, well-dressed, with a briefcase resting on his leg. Both greet each other with a gesture and then exchange a few words about the train delay. There's a natural pause. Then you ask, without being too direct or informal, "What is your story?" He looks at you a little surprised, but without being discouraged. After a moment, he smiles slightly and says, "That is a great question," before beginning to speak slowly. He doesn't talk about his job or his position, but about moving from city, about leaving something behind. The feeling of starting over. The train arrives, but the atmosphere between you feels lighter, more human, as if something real had briefly passed between two strangers. Asking someone what they do reduces the focus. It places him in a category: teacher, engineer, student, unemployed, and the conversation tends to stay there, locked up. Unemployed, and the conversation tends to stay there, pigeonholed. But asking someone about their story does the opposite. It opens the doors. It tells him that you are curious about him, not just about his function. In therapy, questions like this help people get out of fixed identities. In a negotiation, they can break the ice. Parents learn more by asking their children about their day in this way. Even in sales or hiring, it shifts the dynamic from evaluation to understanding. When we put aside the script and let someone contribute theirs, something shifts. Stories invite honesty. They allow texture, history, even contradiction. And in that space, the real conversation begins. Sometimes, the best way to understand someone is not to define them, but to give them space to grow. Describe their expression, not their state of mind. Understanding someone does not always mean naming what they feel. Sometimes it means looking at what you see, gently, and without making conjectures. In a quiet cafeteria late in the afternoon, two coworkers are sitting near the window. One of them is unusually quiet, stirring his drink instead of drinking it. The other watches him for a moment and then says, "You've been staring at the same spot on your cup, and your jaw has been clenched since we sat down." The first one blinks, surprised, and then sighs. "Yes, I'm sorry. It's just that it has been a very long morning." The state of mind opens not because the emotion has been named, but because the tension was seen. When you describe someone's expression, their posture, their gestures, their silence, it is an invitation, a mirror, not a label. Saying that someone seems upset can be intrusive or presumptuous, but saying that they have been very quiet since that call leaves room, it allows them to decide what it means. In therapy, this creates a space without pressure. In raising children, it helps them express their feelings without feeling watched or controlled. In sales or negotiations, it maintains emotional awareness without things becoming personal. In close relationships, it shows attention without control. You are not diagnosing, you are observing. Carefully, not commenting. People don't always want you to read their mind, but they often want to know that you've noticed something has changed. And the safest way to show it is to reflect what you see on the surface and let them fill in the rest. It's a small change between saying what you think they feel and what you see happening. But that space is often all someone needs to start opening up on their own terms. Calmly and willingly reflect their breathing to calm them. Sometimes words are not what helps. Someone is anxious, agitated, or simply on edge, and advice is useless. But your presence can help, not by saying the right thing, but by breathing in the right way. When you silently follow someone's breathing, your body says, "I'm here. I'm with you." And once you immerse yourself, you can slowly slow your own breathing, guiding theirs without having to speak. Don't announce it. Don't force it. Just breathe, steadily, calmly, with your feet on the ground. And often something in them softens to meet you. You will notice it in the shared silences. Sitting together on a small park bench after receiving bad news, standing next to each other in the kitchen after an argument, or waiting for a moment that does not need to be fixed to pass, simply embraced. It works because the nervous system is social. We imitate each other without realizing it. That is why, when you give someone a slower rhythm to adapt to, their body usually follows it without realizing it. It's not about control. It is about connection. Synchronizing breathing is not a mere tactic. It is a gesture, a way of saying you're not alone at that moment. So, next time someone seems overwhelmed, do not rush to comfort them with words. Simply pause, sit close, synchronize your breathing with theirs, let yours calm down, and trust that sometimes calm is something that is transmitted to another person, not by explaining it, but by living it by their side. Use anchors. Mention a large number. First, perception silently shapes reality, often in ways we hardly notice. You're in a neighborhood cafeteria. The mid-morning sunlight gently warms this space. At a nearby table, two friends discuss their vacation plans. One of them leans forward thoughtfully and mentions that flights to their destination had an initial price of around $1,200. The other friend's eyes widen slightly upon hearing the figure. There's a brief pause between them. Then, calmly, he adds that he recently saw tickets for about $500. Instantly, the atmosphere changes and relief and interest visibly spread across his friend's face. Without pressure, the conversation flows comfortably toward trip planning. The second figure now seems surprisingly reasonable. This subtle technique works naturally because our mind anchors itself to the initial information that we hear, using it as a reference point. Mentioning a larger figure first gently shapes expectations, making the smaller figures that follow seem significantly more attractive. Therapists gently introduce difficult concepts before simpler ones, guiding clients toward comfort. Sellers raise initial prices to highlight subsequent discounts. Negotiators refer to ambitious demands, so realistic offers seem attractive. And parents occasionally mention more important tasks before smaller ones, softening the resistance of children. Anchoring is not manipulation. It is silently guiding perception toward comfort and agreement. By starting with a higher number, you effortlessly recalibrate expectations, fostering openness without conflict. Our choices often arise from quiet, unnoticed moments. Introducing ideas with strategic subtlety can transform resistance into ease, gently directing interactions toward mutual understanding without force or friction. To say that is exactly what I would have said. Tranquility usually works better when it sounds like agreement, not a correction. At a small round table in a shared break room, a junior colleague shares an idea during lunch. Something about changing the team's workflow to reduce redundant updates. He speaks quickly, a little insecure, his gaze restless in search of approval. The more senior coworker across from them listens and then says with a small nod, "That is exactly what I would have said." There's a pause. The younger one blinks and then lets out a chuckle. Really? The energy shifts. They sit more upright. The conversation opens up. They continue explaining with more confidence now. Not because the plan is perfect, but because they no longer feel like they are guessing alone. Saying, "That is exactly what I would have said," is a simple way to affirm someone without exaggerating. It is not exaggerated praise. It does not sound artificial. It simply says, "You're on the right track. And if I were in your place, I would do the same." That type of validation is disarming. In parenting, it gives children a moment of shared thought. In leadership, it builds trust in those who are still learning. In therapy or coaching, it helps someone trust their instincts. In sales, it makes the other person feel like they are already in tune with you. You are not putting yourself above them. You are at their side. And when someone hears that their thinking already reflects yours, they not only feel supported, but intelligent, capable at the same level. And sometimes that small point in common is all that is needed to turn hesitation into a real impulse. It seems that there is an instant connection. A strange connection is created when someone says, "You seem like the type of person who," is not always correct. Sometimes it deviates a little, but it almost always hits the mark. Not because it is perfectly insightful, but because it shows that they are paying attention. They're noticing something and are trying to express it, even delicately. This simple phrase creates an opening. It is not a compliment, nor a supposition. It is a reflection, a gentle way of saying, "This is how you seem to me." And most people lean into that moment because we rarely get to see ourselves through the eyes of another person, unless we ask them to. You seem like the type of person who carries snacks in their bag, just in case. You seem like one of those who realize when someone feels excluded. You seem like someone who reads more than they appear to. Even if it is a little wrong, it invites clarification. Not entirely, but just like that, the conversation deepens. What was superficial effortlessly becomes personal. This works because it balances two human needs, to be seen and to be understood. When someone offers you a perception of yourself, they give you the opportunity to accept or reframe it. In any case, it makes the conversation go from being trivial chatter to something with more substance. So, the next time you try to connect with someone, don't ask them to define themselves. Offer a vision of how you see them and let them respond. A phrase that begins with "you seem" can be the beginning of something that you really want to finish. Pose the question as an option. Nobody likes to be told what to do, even if it is reasonable or useful. But offer the same request as an option. Suddenly, it is easier to agree. This is because the brain cares not only about the message, but also about control. When you give someone an option, you protect their autonomy. And that peace of mind usually gets you what you wanted anyway. Instead of, "Let's go now," try saying, "Do you want to leave now or stay a few more minutes?" Instead of, "You have to calm down," ask, "Do you want to breathe a little or talk about it?" In both cases, nothing changes except the feeling of responsibility. You will notice it among close friends when you make travel plans, where the most flexible expressions usually win, or in shared projects, where expressing something like, "Do you want to?" facilitates collaboration. It even works in text messages. Both options are fine, but do you prefer to do it today or tomorrow? It is not about reverse psychology. It is about eliminating resistance before it appears. People do not resist because of what you say, but because it has not been their decision. Therefore, if you want less friction, do not push at all. Let them lead, because once they feel it is their choice, it is not necessary to force the result. It simply happens. Mention a shared interest, not a person. Not all connections start with who you know. They often start with what matters to you. In a company elevator, two people remain silent. One holds a notebook, the other looks at his phone. They have crossed paths before in the hallway, but they have never spoken. When the elevator doors close, the one with the notebook glances over and says, "Is that the new season of that podcast about finances? I intended to catch up." The person with the phone looks up, surprised, and nods. Yes, the truth is that it's quite good. This week, they dedicated a segment to behavioral investment. The tone shifts. The silence fills with something warmer. Without awkward introductions, without looking for common acquaintances, just an idea that both recognize. Mentioning a common interest, not a mutual contact, creates an equal starting point. It does not depend on social circles or networks. It is based on value, on curiosity. It gives the other person something to respond to that isn't filtered by status or relationships. In sales, it lets you skip presentations and build trust through relevance. In therapy, it creates security through shared points. In raising children, focusing on a shared project often works better than invoking authority. In leadership, it invites collaboration instead of hierarchy. When you lead with "I know them," it may seem you're exerting influence. But when you lead with "I like this," you offer something lighter, an invitation, not a calculation. That point of shared interest, even if small, can turn a distant moment into a real one. Because the fastest way to connect isn't through another person. It is by meeting right where both people are. You probably already know this. Validation can be more persuasive than instruction, especially when it seems a reminder is offered, not a correction. Late in the afternoon, fluorescent lights hum in a quiet conference room. Two coworkers are sitting across from each other, reviewing a draft. One of them stops and realizes that there's a part that does not fit. Instead of rushing to correct it, he says kindly, "You probably already know it, but this section could be better." The tone is soft and without pressure. His colleague nods without getting defensive, just thoughtful. "Yes, I was thinking the same thing," he says, and begins to take notes. There is no resistance, only agreement, because it hasn't felt like criticism. It has felt like collaboration. That phrase, "you probably already know it," works because it preserves the ego while gently inviting change. It gives credit to the other person before offering your opinion, which reduces their defenses. When people feel respected, they are more likely to consider your view. In therapy, this language helps someone accept a difficult truth. In raising children, it avoids rejection. In sales, it allows new information to be accepted without sounding like correction. In negotiation, it frames ideas without creating conflict. And in leadership, it softens comments so they're easier to accept. You're not belittling the other person, but putting them at your level. The message still arrives, but with dignity. Often, it is not what you say, but the delicacy with which you say it. Leading with respect turns advice into affirmations, and that is when people are more willing to listen to what is coming. It raises ideas in the form of questions. Guiding someone's thinking doesn't always require persuasion. Sometimes only the right question is needed. You are in a quiet meeting room at the end of the afternoon. The conversation has slowed. On the other side of the table, a colleague hesitates about whether to accept a new project. List the risks. Too much work, unclear deadlines, failures in the past. Instead of refuting, you sit for a moment and ask him, "What would it be like if you really led this project?" Your tone is neutral, almost informal, but something in the question makes him stop. He leans back, looking slightly up, not getting defensive, just curious. Without resistance, he begins to consider it, not because he's been told, but because he now feels the idea is his and wants to explore it. Formulating suggestions as questions invites the other person's mind to move voluntarily instead of reacting. It softens resistance and awakens curiosity. When you make a statement, people often instinctively evaluate or argue. But when you ask a question, especially one that subtly conveys an idea, they are more likely to process it on their own. Therapists use this to help clients reflect without getting defensive. In negotiation, questions change the tone from confrontation to exploration. In this way, parents guide decisions more smoothly. And in sales, a well-asked question can be more compelling than any sales pitch. You're not forcing an agreement. You're simply offering a framework, a gateway, not a direction. And when the idea seems to arise from within, the mind is more willing to fully commit to it. That is the silent strength of a carefully formulated question. Use the focus effect to dominate a room. In most rooms, everyone thinks they're being watched, not because they are, but because the brain silently insists. This is the focus effect. The tendency to overestimate how much others notice our actions, our appearance, or our mistakes. That stain that you keep adjusting on your sleeve to cover. The stumble you took when you came in. It may obsess you for hours, but most likely no one else noticed. And there is the trick. While you feel like the center of attention, everyone else feels it too. Most people are so consumed by their own awareness that they barely have time to fully focus on yours. But this is where the situation reverses. If your brain already believes you're being watched, you can use that illusion as an advantage. Not trying to be perfect, but showing naturalness in the moment. People who seem more self-confident are not usually the most refined or the ones who have practiced the most. They're simply the ones who do not strive to hide. They accept the light that is already there and place themselves under it without apologizing. That quiet acceptance of oneself, with relaxed shoulders and a natural expression, creates presence. People notice you not because you have demanded their attention, but because you have not become tense in the face of it. Dominating a room does not mean taking it over. It means understanding that no one is watching you as closely as you think. And if they do, you decide what they see. Not someone who shrinks from an imaginary judgment, but someone calm with their feet on the ground. So the next time that invisible spotlight is directed at you, do not rush to get out of it. Stay exactly where you are. Let the moment settle and realize that being seen is not a threat. It is an opportunity. Let them reject control. Control is not always taken. It is something we often need to feel before we are willing to move forward. It is a quiet afternoon at a hardware store. A young man stands near the cash register, looking at a list on his phone. An older employee approaches, polite but not intruding. "You probably don't need help, right?" he says with a small smile, pointing to the list with his head. The young man laughs softly. "No, I'm fine." Then he looks at the shelves, hesitates, and adds, "Actually, where's the cork?" The exchange is informal, unforced. The invitation to reject the offer did not close the door. It opened it. Giving someone the possibility of saying no often makes them more willing to say yes. It restores their sense of choice, even if the result does not change. When people feel pressured, even slightly, they instinctively resist, retreating only to preserve their capacity for action. But when you offer them a clear way out, you make them feel safer. Parents use this when asking for cooperation. "Do you want to clean your room now or in 10 minutes? Salespeople pose requests as optional. "Would it be crazy to take a look today?" Therapists start conversations with, "Tell me if this doesn't feel right to you." In all these cases, saying no first allows the other person to re-engage on their own terms. It's not about manipulation. It's about allowing someone to protect their space so that they can choose to open it. Sometimes, influence does not come from pressing. It comes from taking a step back enough so the other person feels they are still in command. Often, that change of tone is all that is needed. Borrowing a pen. Small openings are often more important than perfect presentations. In a waiting room, just before a training session, two strangers sit in separate chairs. One is looking at his phone. The other rummages in her bag and then leans in silently. "Do you have a pen that you can lend me?" It's not to bother you. It's just a simple question. The first person looks up, surprised but not bothered. Yes, just a moment. He hands it to her with a softer expression. A moment later, conversation begins. It is not forced, it is natural. Where they are from, what the session is about. Some jokes are told before the trainer arrives. It's something small, but the tension in the room has disappeared. Borrowing something, especially something small like a pen, is not about need. It has to do with vulnerability. It gives the other person a role, that of helper. And without saying it, you have told him that you trust him enough to ask him for it. That subtle dynamic creates a kind of warmth. Therapists sometimes use small requests to encourage frankness. In sales, it helps establish rapport before the presentation. In classrooms, it balances power. In social environments, it is often the fastest way to go from strangers to participants. It's not about impressing anyone. You're asking for something simple, human, and easy to grant. And that little yes, the moment someone helps you, is usually all it takes to break the ice. You have created a bond, not through charm, but through interaction itself. The appropriate interaction, yes. The one that does not ask you to like it, only that you know it briefly, naturally, as it is. Lower the volume when asking for silence. The world rarely slows down on its own, but there are subtle ways to induce it to a calmer pace. You're in the back seat of a taxi. City lights slide through the fogged windows. In front, the driver speaks loudly on the phone, music playing with radio interference. Next to you, your friend leans forward and asks the driver a question in a soft voice, slightly lower than the noise around you. At first, nothing much changes. But little by little, the driver's voice fades, the volume of the music goes down, and the chaotic energy transforms into a calm harmony. The subtle change leads everyone to a tacit agreement of calm. Speaking softly amid the noise is an intuitive signal that pushes others towards tranquility. When someone lowers their voice, listeners naturally lean in, unconsciously matching this quieter tone. It is a sign of respect, intimacy, and trust, inviting others to imitate the behavior without realizing it. Therapists often lower their voices to ease tension. Negotiators quietly control rooms, and parents instinctively soften their tone to calm children. Lowering the volume avoids a confrontation. It leads others to tranquility without resistance. The quieter voice naturally assumes control, not by dominating, but by guiding attention inward, bringing the room closer and clarifying it. High volume can attract attention, but softness inspires genuine listening and thoughtful response. In situations of increasing noise or tension, letting the voice slide gently below the surface is often enough to restore the tone. It is not dominance, just a subtle invitation to share calm. Lasting impressions are not formed by the duration of something. They're formed by when it ends. You're sitting on a roof during a small gathering, early in the afternoon. The warm breeze caresses the air gently. Laughter surrounds the table now. Glasses clink softly together, and the energy feels easy and natural. A story lands just perfectly. Everyone laughs all together. The kind of moment that feels effortless. You look around, take a deep breath, and stand up silently. I have to get up early, you say with a smile, picking up your jacket. There is a brief chorus of surprise, even a slight protest, but quickly fades into good wishes and gratitude. When leaving, the feeling that accompanies you is fullness, not exhaustion. It has been quite enough. And for everyone else, the night ends on a high note. Our minds do not average every moment. We remember the emotional peak and the end. Therefore, when we leave at the right time, we frame the memory with energy and clarity. In therapy, it helps to close a session in a way that is recorded. In raising children, ending an activity before boredom sets and makes the children ask for more. In sales, ending a presentation just after the strongest point keeps interest high. Even in relationships, the moment in which you decide to leave a moment can determine how they remember you. Leaving when things are still going well requires moderation, but lets the moment stay alive without spoiling. You are not abandoning the experience. You preserve its best version. It is not about controlling the story. It is about respecting its rhythm. Finishing things just before they reach their peak is not evasion. It is a silent precision that allows the best part to resonate longer. Comment on the environment, not on them. It is not always necessary to name the tension directly. Sometimes it only needs a softer reflection. In the line of a small grocery store, a woman stands rigid, with her arms crossed and her gaze forward. The cashier greets her, but she barely responds. Behind her, a man with only a few items waits patiently. He notices the environment, but instead of commenting about her, he looks around and says in a low voice, "It looks like one of those days when everyone has their shoulders shrugged." The line advances. Her posture softens. She doesn't say much, but the air around her changes. Something small, something tense is released. When emotions are on the surface, expressing them directly can be counterproductive. People don't always want to hear that you're upset or seem stressed. It can be intrusive, but if you comment on the space, the energy, the tone of the room, you give them space to breathe without putting them in a bind. In therapy, this gently opens difficult sessions. In raising children, it helps children feel seen without feeling exposed. In negotiation or sales, it reestablishes the state of mind without aggravating it. Even in friendships, it offers support without pressure. You are not diagnosing the person. You are observing the room in which you both are. That small change from "you are" to "you feel that way" facilitates connection. It demonstrates awareness without judging. And most of the time, that is enough to help someone lower their guard a little without needing to give explanations. Not all bridges are built by naming what is wrong. Sometimes it starts by realizing what you are both living in silence together. Dress one level above. At a weekend meeting, a person enters a little more elegant than the others. It is not flashy. It only has clean lines, well-fitting clothes, and a calm confidence. Nobody says anything, but the looks linger a little longer. The conversations are directed toward her a little faster. That is the trick. Dress a little better than the others, not to stand out, but to show interest. It is not about brands. It is not about trends. It is about intention. When you present yourself a little more groomed, people assume that the rest of you is too. This is noticeable in the openings of art exhibitions, with a person who impresses with their jeans and impeccable collar awakens curiosity. Or in casual dates, where the effort attracts much more attention than charm. Even in community events, someone with clean shoes and their shirt tucked in is usually asked, "Hey, are you helping organize this?" Unconsciously, we attribute competence and warmth to those who seem to make an effort, but not exaggerate. It is the ideal point between being unnoticed and standing out. The visual signal gets processed in seconds. Before speaking, people decide if they lean toward you, if they listen to you longer, if they remember you. And once that impression forms, your words take advantage of that impulse. You don't need a whole new wardrobe. You just need to go a step beyond what is expected. Because dressing well doesn't say, "Look at me," but "This was important enough to me to prepare." And people tend to remember those who make things seem more intentional. Unlock the 90-minute sleep cycle. That change of mentality, thinking in sleep cycles instead of hours, can change your feeling of rest. Sleep develops in rhythms of about 90 minutes. Light sleep, deep sleep, REM sleep, restart. Even after 9 hours, if you wake up in the middle of the cycle, you feel dazed. But if you wake up right after a cycle ends, even with fewer hours of sleep, you often feel alert. It's like sneaking out of the cinema right after the credits, instead of during a scene. This trick comes naturally to people who have irregular schedules, such as creatives who work late and want to remain functional in the mornings, or travelers who sleep at untimely hours and just want to wake up clear-minded. Even during unexpected naps, 90 minutes can feel like a complete restart if timed well. You could try it tonight. You just have to look at the current time, add 15 minutes to fall asleep, and then count forward in 90-minute blocks. Set the alarm to sound at the end of a full cycle, not in the middle. It's not about sleeping more, but about waking up more refreshed. And when you synchronize with your body's rhythm, mornings stop feeling like interruptions and start feeling like arrivals. Maintain eye contact for 1 second longer. Trust is not built by words alone. It often forms silently in the moments between them. You're standing in the checkout line of a supermarket late in the afternoon. The items slide rhythmically down the conveyor belt as the cashier mechanically scans each item. When your turn comes, you greet her gently. When she finishes scanning, you ask how her shift has been, looking her in the eyes gently, just 1 second longer than usual. Her eyes falter briefly, surprised, and pause thoughtfully. In that extra beat of eye contact, her tiredness subtly transforms into warmth, breaking the routine of mechanical courtesy. A gentle openness arises between you, an authentic moment of human connection forged silently by a prolonged gaze. Prolonging eye contact, even for an instant, invites trust because it shows genuine interest and frankness. Instinctively, people perceive sincerity when eyes linger on theirs a bit longer than expected. Therapists use this subtle pause to encourage frankness, subtly indicating that they are fully present. Salespeople take advantage of it naturally to create an instant connection. Negotiators silently build trust, and parents reassure their children with a steady and meaningful gaze. This simple gesture fosters an atmosphere of understanding and respect, improving each interaction without the need for words. Holding someone's gaze a little longer isn't about dominance or power. It is a silent affirmation. It is to delicately communicate respect and genuine interest. It is an instinctive signal that's universally recognized, a small but profound sign that you are fully present, truly listening, and connecting deeply. Real communication often resides more in the spaces of silence than in the spoken sentences. Allowing eye contact to gently prolong shortens distances that words alone cannot. Silently transforms everyday moments into genuine connections. Ask for a small favor to create a bond. Borrow a phone charger. To ask someone to save your place in line. To ask for help moving a chair. They're not desperate acts. They're small exercises in confidence. When you ask for a small favor, you aren't bothering anyone. You're making a subtle invitation to invest in you. And once they do, even if it's little, their brain starts to justify it. I must like this person. If not, why would I have helped them? This is how closeness begins. Not through great moments, but through small requests that silently imply, I trust you. It's called the Ben Franklin effect. But you don't need to know the name to feel its effect. You'll see it when new neighbors arrive and ask where recycling is. Or when two people who barely know each other enter a room full of people and one whispers, will you save me a spot? It works because effort changes perception. We are programmed to assume that our actions mean something. Therefore, making a small gesture of kindness changes how we feel for the person to whom we do it. The trick is not manipulation. It is vulnerability. You are not proving that you are useful. You are proving that you are willing to ask. And that is often what turns courtesy into connection. So, the next time you want to establish a good relationship, don't offer help. Ask for it just a little. Because people bond faster when they feel needed, not just admired. Act as if you had forgotten that they are famous. Fame creates distance, but it doesn't take much for things to return to the same level. It is a quiet waiting room in an airport, early in the morning. A man is sitting alone with a book, his hood up and his baseball cap pulled down. He is recognizable, but no one approaches him. In front of him, a middle-aged woman puts down her tea and looks at him. Do you mind if I sit here? She asks simply. He nods. A few minutes pass. Then she leans slightly forward. Is that book good? He stops, looks up, and smiles a little. Yes, the truth is that it is. The conversation drifts to authors, long flights, bad coffee. She does not mention a single time his name, his career, or anything other than the present moment. When she leaves, he says to her, "Thank you." That was the most normal conversation I've had in a long time. When someone is used to being treated differently, the most disarming thing you can do is not play along. Ignoring the pedestal gives them space to get off it. This does not mean being rude or dismissive. It means talking to the person, not to the focus. In sales, this blurs the pressure. In interviews, it creates rapport. In negotiations, it takes authority figures to a shared space. Even when raising children, treating older children as true collaborators instead of interpreters or students creates mutual respect. People relax when they stop performing, and the fastest way to get someone to stop acting is to stop applauding them. Treating someone as just another person in the room does not detract from them. Dignify any interaction, and in most cases, that is what they expect. Point with your feet. Reveal your true intentions. It is easy to fake eye contact. It is easy to smile politely, but feet rarely lie. They are often the first part of you that gives away what you want, whether to stay, leave, connect, or move away. Observe any conversation from afar. You will see it before you hear it. If two people are talking, their feet point toward each other, not just their heads. If someone wants to leave, their words may remain, but their feet are already pointing toward the door. This is low-level body language, not the kind that is rehearsed, but the kind that is used by default, and once you notice it, it is impossible to stop seeing it. It appears at bus stops, during trivial chats that drag on too long, at parties when someone is talking to a group, but is clearly focused on one person. Even during informal meetings, where two people sitting with their legs crossed, facing each other, often forget that they are among others. Your feet anchor your attention. They point to where your energy is going, even if you have not said so yet. It also works in reverse. If you want someone to feel included, change your posture. Point towards them. You do not have to speak louder or gesticulate more. Your feet do half the work for you, because beneath every conversation, there is another that unfolds in silence. And in most cases, it is your shoes that speak first. Laugh a little before telling jokes. Humor does not always work because of what you say, but because of how you say it. At a late meal, in an almost empty cafeteria, two coworkers sit across from each other, picking at their salads between meetings. The conversation is slow, slightly tense, still recovering from a disagreement from earlier in the week. One of them, stirring the dressing a little with her fork, says with a half smile and a brief giggle, "I think they use sarcasm instead of salt here." The other looks up, pauses, and then laughs sincerely. This time, the energy between them softens, not because the joke is brilliant, but because it feels safe. The laughter came before the punchline, and that changed everything. A slight laugh before a joke not only indicates humor, but also intention. It gives others permission to laugh with you instead of risking misinterpreting you. The initial giggle makes the moment warmer, more collaborative. It tells the listener not to take things seriously. Parents use it instinctively when trying to relieve tension. In therapy, humor is often introduced gently, as in this case, to facilitate entry into difficult topics. In sales or leadership, a soft laugh can relax the atmosphere without losing professionalism. Even on a first date or in an informal setting, that little hint of fun helps jokes feel shared, not risky. You are not laughing at your own joke. You're giving it a soft landing. You are building the laughter together. Humor is not just the way to say something. It is an invitation. And a small laugh before the phrase quietly tells someone that they can smile now. Use their name. Reconfigure the brain. In a neighborhood cafeteria, someone places an order. Half distracted, the waiter repeats it. "Understood, Jess. I'll bring it to you in a moment." It is simple. It is not a big deal. But Jess looks up, slightly surprised. The sound of their name, pronounced without being asked, arrives in silence. Names have weight. Even when used quietly, they cut through background noise. They tell us, this moment is for you. It is not necessary to overuse them. In fact, when you mention someone's name in a natural pause once or twice, it can change the whole tone. It is a sign of presence, a small indication that says, I am not talking to anyone. I'm talking to you. This works especially well in new friendships, when people are still figuring out if they are seen as they truly are. Or in family, but distant relationships, like a neighbor you only half know, where using their name shortens distance. It also softens tension. When conversations get complicated or emotions intensify, a name quietly re-enters the moment. It reminds both parties that a person is behind the words. You will even notice it in written form. A message that ends with your name feels more anchored, direct, and human, as if it were not copied and pasted. It was meant for you. That is the effect. A name, when used with sincerity, not only personalizes but also gives security. It restores concentration, and sometimes it reminds someone who they are just when they most need it. Let them choose the moment. Pressure does not always come from a question. Sometimes it comes from the clock. Late in the afternoon, in the hallway of a quiet office, a manager meets a member of their team as they pick up their things. Do you have a minute to talk? The employee hesitates, with their bag already on their shoulder and their face clearly tired. The manager sees it and takes a step back. Actually, would you prefer to talk tomorrow morning? The employee nods almost instantly. Yes, I would appreciate it. And when they talk the next day, it is better, less cautious, and more focused. The same topic, but at a better time. Letting someone choose when to participate gives them a small but powerful sense of control. It tells them that you are important, not just what you can do. Whether it is a conversation to give feedback, a request for help, or a chat to see how they are emotionally, the given moment changes the result. In therapy, clients open up more when they do not feel cornered. In parenting, asking, "Do you want to talk now or after dinner?" creates security. In a negotiation, offering a pause usually generates more trust than moving forward. Even in intimate friendships, asking someone if they want to talk about something difficult demonstrates an interest that words alone cannot express. You're not giving up right now. You're choosing to let things unfold at their own pace, not yours. People think better when they feel less pressured. And often, the most meaningful conversations do not occur when you are prepared. They occur when they do. Giving them the opportunity to decide does not delay you. It makes everything else go better when the moment finally arrives. Never break eye contact while listening. Presence is not always demonstrated by what you say. It is often revealed by what you do not look away from. In a quiet office, just after business hours, a junior employee stands at the door. Her boss, who is still picking up, invites her to sit down. She hesitates, then begins to speak carefully, cautiously, about something that has been bothering her. The tone is calm, the words insecure. But the manager does not interrupt her. He does not look at his phone, or the clock, or the bag that he still has half closed. He just watches her speak attentively, with a fixed gaze. Nothing forced, just total presence. When she finishes, her voice is clearer. She seems relieved, not because the problem has been solved, but because she did not feel alone while saying it. Maintaining eye contact while listening tells the other person that their words do not need to fight for space. It gives you proof that you are not only listening to her, but that you are with her. And when someone knows that you're not going to back down or walk away, they talk more. Therapists rely on it to create security. Salespeople use it to calm doubts. Parents use it to show their children that even the difficult parts of conversation will not drive them away. In negotiations or conflicts, constant eye contact becomes a silent anchor. It says, "I'm not going to abandon this moment just because it is uncomfortable." It is not necessary to stare. You just have to stay, looking them in the eyes with total attention. When you listen without breaking eye contact, you give more than attention. You give stability. And in the middle of an uncertain sentence, that is often what someone needs most. Smile with your eyes. Warmth is read faster than words. And sometimes the whole conversation changes before it even starts. At the counter of a pharmacy, a young woman approaches the cashier, clearly overwhelmed. She holds a prescription and a bag of medications, trying to juggle both while talking on the phone. The employee behind the counter waits without rushing her. And when she finally looks up, nervous and half apologizing, he greets her with a soft and firm smile, not only in his mouth, but also in his eyes. His face does not convey joy. It simply shows patience, tranquility, that she's not a problem to be solved or a delay to be managed. She lowers her shoulders slightly. She ends the call, thanks in a low voice, and from there, everything continues more calmly. A smile that is only seen in the mouth may seem fake. One that reaches the eyes is perceived as presence. People notice that difference instantly. It is not about exaggerating joy or forcing kindness. It is about transmitting security. When the eyes are soft, they show that the person behind is paying attention in a kind and human way. In therapy, This is how trust is built before the first word. In raising children, it reassures without need for explanations. In customer service and sales, it calms a room. And in everyday moments when someone is tense, embarrassed, or insecure, it changes the entire tone of the interaction. You don't need a big smile. You just need a sincere smile. And sincerity is always reflected in the eyes. Sometimes, what calms someone is not what you say. It is the simple way you show them that you are not in a hurry to judge. You are simply there. And for many people, that is more than enough. Be self-critical, then take the lead. Confidence makes people listen. But too much confidence too soon makes people withdraw, even if they don't show it. They nod, they smile, but something remains defensive. What lowers that guard, strange as it may seem, is a brief moment of humility. You're in a small team meeting, nothing important, just a weekly meeting. It's your turn to present an idea. Before getting down to business, you say, "Well, I'm not exactly a design genius, so don't be too hard on the sketches." Everyone laughs. The atmosphere relaxes. You continue, and suddenly everyone is paying attention. You have not lowered yourself. You have only made yourself easier to listen to. That is the change. When you make fun of yourself slightly first, the focus softens. You're not announcing your domain. You are inviting comfort. And once people feel comfortable, they're much more open to what comes next. It works because self-deprecation disarms. It indicates that you are aware of yourself, that you are not overcompensating, that you're not trying too hard. It also anticipates judgment by saying what people might think. You take away its power. And then, when you speak confidently, your message has more strength. It is perceived as something earned, not forced. You will hear it in comedy monologues. You will see it in TED Talks, in leadership retreats, even in classrooms. Not as an acting, but as a movement to set pace. Start with warmth, then lead with clarity. The trick is not to downplay what matters. It is about knowing when to soften tone so people don't back down before you speak. Say something real, a little self-critical, maybe even clumsy. Then, say what you have come to say. In most cases, it is not necessary to be eloquent. You just have to be someone people want to listen to. And a moment of sincere humility is usually the easiest way to achieve it. The first word is what counts most. In a small informal meeting, someone enters with a plate of appetizers and says, "Well, you have to listen to this story before I run out of courage." Everyone around the table stops what they're doing, not because of the content of the story, but because of the moment in which it is told. It was the very first thing. It arrived with such energy. It has framed everything after. That's the primacy effect. The first thing said is not only remembered better, but determines how everything else will be heard. When starting a conversation, the first sentence presents more than just information. It directs your attention. It establishes a tone. It says, "This is the tone we're following." You'll see it when someone breaks the ice with a curious fact or disconcerting question. Suddenly, the whole group shifts. What seemed formal becomes more fun. Or when you meet someone new, what they first say about a common friend stays with you, even if they say 10 other things later. It is not about control, but influence. The brain is programmed to cling to its first image. Everything after is compared against it. That is why people who start warmly are rarely seen as cold, even speaking bluntly later. Or why a first compliment strengthens connection, even if the rest of the conversation falters a bit. If you want to shape a state of mind, shape the beginning. Start with something sincere, curious, or intentional. Because once the framework is established, people tend to see the image as you have painted it, regardless of what is added later. Speak using stories, not points. Some things are easier understood when you stop explaining and start remembering them. Inside a shared office, two people are facing each other. One is new to the team, the other more experienced. The new one seems overwhelmed, frustrated. "I'm doing everything correctly," she says, "but nothing seems to work." The more experienced colleague nods, pauses, then says, "I had a boss who never gave feedback. For months, I thought I was failing. Then, one day, I made a small change to a report, and he forwarded it to the entire department. No comments, no notes, he simply sent it as if it was his." The new employee raises her eyebrow. The more veteran one shrugs. That is how I learned his way of approving was silence. She then smiles, not because the situation has resolved, but because she now sees it from a different angle. The tension now is relieved. The conversation softens now. The message did not arrive in the form of a list. It arrived as a story. Stories evade resistance. They're how we truly make sense of things. When listing facts, people evaluate them. But when telling a story, they absorb it all. In therapy, a short story can replace a longer explanation. In raising children, it keeps them interested without telling them what to do. In negotiation, stories allow arguments to sink in without pressure. In teaching, they turn data into something real. A story gives structure without demanding agreement. It invites people to participate instead of talking over them. And when you speak with stories, small and unpolished, you don't just share what you know. You offer a way to feel it. And that is what usually makes it stick. Give the gift first. You show up with their favorite drink. Nothing big, nothing flashy, just something small that you haven't asked for. They tell you, you didn't have to. You answer, I know. But something changes. Giving first changes the whole tone of a relationship. It rewrites the atmosphere before a single word is exchanged. We're used to transactions, to keeping track. Even when it is not our intention, a part of us calculates the effort. But when someone gives without asking for anything in return, that alters the system in the best way. It doesn't have to be a gift. It could be a favor, a seat, a piece of dessert saved, a message sent just to say, hello, this made me think of you. You will notice how differently people respond when you show up having already done something kind. Barriers crumble. Conversations flow more easily. People become more open because they have already received a gesture of affection. It works because generosity, especially when it is not explained, tells people that they matter. Not as a reward, nor as a response, but as a choice. This does not mean going overboard. It means leading with affection, offering a moment of kindness without waiting to see if it's returned. Because once someone feels graced, not obligated, they begin to see the space between you as a safe place. And from there, the rest is easier. The circle of trust. Sometimes people don't need encouragement. They just need a mirror that reflects what they would like to believe. Outside a crowded cafeteria, someone hesitates before entering an open mic night. He signed up weeks ago, but almost passes by. A stranger holding the door smiles and says, "It looks like you're right on time." I always like listening to the first artists. There is no pressure, just a small show of confidence. And when he gets on stage, that borrowed confidence becomes his own. The circle of trust does not begin with self-confidence, but with the way others see us. When you treat someone as if they were already capable, they begin to act as such. And when others respond positively to that behavior, confidence is reinforced. The circle is reinforced, the posture changes, and confidence begins to seem like it has always been there. This is noticeable among artists backstage, where nerves dissipate the moment someone tells them, "You have the perfect energy for this audience," or in collaborative projects where a quiet voice is encouraged to speak after another person listens to it carefully. Even with younger siblings or close friends, a little recognition is often more effective than advice. It's not about false praise. It's about giving them enough confidence so that they feel it themselves. Because most people don't need to be reminded of their limits. They already know them well. What they need is someone to look at them as if they have already arrived on the other side. Speak to the pain, not logic. You are sitting across from a colleague in a meeting room. The presentation is about to begin, but you feel resistance in the air. He has his arms crossed, his brow slightly furrowed, and glances at his phone every few minutes. You start talking about the advantages of the new project, detailing the deadlines, the gains in efficiency and cost savings. But as you speak, you see his attention wander and his body language close. So, without missing a beat, you change your strategy. I know that right now, we are all overwhelmed with deadlines, and that adding another project may seem like too much, but imagine trying to meet your goals without this tool. It's only going to complicate matters. The frustration of not having it will accumulate, and we will all be in trouble at the last moment. Suddenly, his posture relaxes. They stop looking at their mobile. They look at you. You have appealed to pain, not to logic. People make decisions based on emotions, not logic. The brain responds faster to feelings of discomfort, fear, or frustration than rational arguments. When you talk about pain, immediate worries, and frustrations, you change the mindset. They stop thinking about numbers and start thinking about how the situation will affect them. This technique works in sales when you focus on what is at stake for the client, in negotiations when you highlight what could be lost, and even in relationships when you acknowledge a person's difficulties instead of just presenting facts. The next time you need someone's attention or action, talk about how they feel, not just what they think. Emotional response is what drives change. Speak more slowly to seem more intelligent. At a weekend meeting, everyone chats while having snacks. The stories overlap, the voices intermingle, and suddenly someone intervenes. Not loudly or forcefully, but more slowly than others. It may seem silly, but has anyone ever read the microwave popcorn instructions? The room quiets just enough to listen. Not because the topic is profound, but because of the way it was raised. When you speak a little slower than expected, people don't perceive it as hesitation, but reflection. The human brain is programmed to associate rhythm with certainty, not with speed or volume, but with rhythm. A slightly slower rhythm says, "I'm not in a hurry. I've already thought about it." You will see it in conversations with someone who does not interrupt, who waits a moment before responding, whose sentences do not intermingle. They're not always the ones who speak the loudest, but often the ones people remember. It is also noticeable in quiet conversations between two people, like on a porch late at night, when someone takes their time to explain how they really feel, or during unexpected encounters, when someone answers a simple question as if it really deserved a sincere answer. It works because our attention follows what seems deliberate. When you slow down, your words stand out. The silence between them becomes important. It is not necessary to lengthen it. You just have to resist the urge to rush. A few more seconds can make even the simplest thought seem grounded, clear, and worthy of being heard. Because in most conversations, the smartest voice is not the one that fills the space. It is the one that knows how to shape it. The last word endures. After dinner, the conversation dies down. The dishes are collected. The chairs are dragged. Someone gets up to leave. Just before leaving, he turns and says, "Do you know, I always feel better after these nights." It is not necessary to answer. It is not necessary to add anything else. But that phrase remains in everyone's mind longer than anything else that has been said before. That is the power of a last word. Not only the last thing said, but what the emotional tone transmits. It does not have to be witty, just be intentional. The human mind gives more importance to what it last hears. It is a simple cognitive bias. The endings are recorded. Whether it is the final moment of a movie or the last message before sleep, we remember more how things leave us than how they find us. You will see when someone ends a call with a "thank you" in a low voice instead of trivial chatter, or when a late-night text does not end with a question, but with reassuring words. Those final notes shape how we remember the entire interaction. It does not have to be profound. Drive carefully. I will think about what you told me. It has been good. Any of these phrases, if said with affection, remain engraved on the memory. They work because the endings seem like conclusions, even if nothing is resolved. And when the last word transmits warmth, sincerity, or perspective, it reframes what came before. It is not necessary to control a conversation. You just have to finish gently. Because long after the conversation ends, people usually remember the end more than the beginning.